The contract burned. 12 years of rules, distance, and iron control gone in seconds as flames consumed the parchment that had defined their marriage. Duke Adrian Vale watched the ash scatter across marble floors, his hand still trembling from throwing it into the fire. Behind him, Alara Montclair stood frozen, the woman he'd purchased like property, treated like a stranger, and nearly lost to another man. "You're free," he whispered, voice breaking on the word. She didn't move toward the door. The entire court would soon know. The Empire's coldest duke had finally shattered. But which way would she choose? Will Alara stay or leave? Watch until the end to find out. Hit that like button and comment which city you're watching from. The first time Adrian Vale laid eyes on his future wife, she was standing in the ruins of her family's reputation, and he felt absolutely nothing. That was exactly how he preferred it. The Montclair estate, if you could still call it that, sprawled across the eastern hills like a corpse slowly being picked clean by creditors. Lord Montclair had gambled away 3 generations of wealth in a single catastrophic year, leaving his family with nothing but a title as hollow as their coffers. The scandal had ripped through the imperial court like wildfire. Nobles whispered behind fans. Former allies crossed streets to avoid them. Even the servants had begun to flee. And at the center of it all stood Alara Montclair, 19 years old, spine straight as a sword, eyes that refused to show the terror she must have been drowning in. Adrian studied her from across the drawing room with the same clinical precision he applied to military campaigns and trade negotiations. Brown hair pulled back in a severe style that did nothing to soften her angular features, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. A dress that had been expensive once, now altered and re-altered to hide how much weight she'd lost. She was drowning, and she knew it. Perfect. "Your Grace," Lord Montclair began, his voice carrying the desperate pitch of a man watching his world collapse. "I cannot express how grateful." "The terms," Adrian interrupted, his voice as cold as the northern territories he'd conquered for the Emperor. He didn't sit. Standing gave him the advantage, made the power dynamic unmistakably clear. "I will settle your debts in full. Your family will retain the Montclair name and a modest estate outside the capital. In exchange, your daughter becomes my Duchess." Alara's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Adrian noticed. He noticed everything. "However," he continued, pulling a thick sheaf of parchment from his coat, "our union will be governed by specific terms. No emotional entanglement, separate living quarters, public appearances as required by imperial decree, nothing more. She will perform the duties of a duchess in name only. I will provide protection and financial security. That is the extent of our arrangement." He laid the contract on the table between them like a weapon. Lord Montclair's hand shook as he reached for it. "Your Grace, surely, those are my terms. Accept them or I walk away, and you can explain to your creditors why the only man willing to save your family left empty-handed." The silence that followed was exquisite in its cruelty. Adrian had learned long ago that silence was a weapon more effective than any blade. Let people sit with their desperation. Let them feel the weight of having no other options. It was Alara who broke first. "May I read it?" Her voice was steady, not the trembling plea he'd expected from a ruined nobleman's daughter being sold like livestock. Adrian's pale gray eyes shifted to her, reassessing. "You can read?" The question came out sharper than he'd intended. Something flashed across her face, anger, quickly buried. "My mother insisted on education before she died. I can read, write, and manage household accounts. I speak 3 languages and can play the pianoforte adequately enough not to embarrass your house at imperial functions." "Alara, her father began. "I would like to read the contract, Your Grace," she repeated, this time meeting Adrian's gaze directly. "If I'm to sign away my life, I should know exactly what I'm agreeing to." For the first time in years, Adrian felt something flicker in his chest. Not warmth. He'd frozen that out long ago. But interest. This girl had more spine than her father. That could be useful. Or dangerous. He gestured toward the papers. Alara moved to the table and began to read. Her father hovered anxiously, but she ignored him, her eyes scanning each clause with careful precision. Adrian watched her face for reactions and saw almost nothing. She'd learned to hide herself, too. Good. This arrangement would work better if neither of them expected anything resembling vulnerability. Separate wings of the estate, she read aloud. No private meetings without formal request. No claims to emotional or physical intimacy. Public appearances limited to imperial functions and necessary social events. She looked up. You're essentially purchasing a title holder who will stay out of your way. Precisely. And if I refuse? Lord Montclair made a strangled sound. Alara, please. If you refuse, Adrian said calmly, your family will be stripped of everything within 3 months. Your father will likely end up in debtor's prison. Your younger sisters will have no prospects for marriage, no dowries, no future. You'll all be lucky to find work as servants in houses that once bowed to your name. He paused. But you won't refuse because you're practical. I can see it in your eyes. You've already calculated every option and realized this is the only one that doesn't end in complete destruction. The hatred that blazed across her face for just a split second, there and gone, was the most honest emotion he'd seen since arriving. Where do I sign? Dad. The wedding was a cold, efficient affair held in the private chapel of Adrian's ancestral estate, a massive fortress of gray stone that overlooked the capital like a predator watching prey. 12 witnesses as required by law. No celebration, no music, no joy. Alara wore a white dress that had belonged to some distant Vale ancestor, altered hastily to fit her frame. It hung on her like a ghost costume. Adrian wore his military dress uniform, medals arranged in perfect rows, every button polished to mere brightness. They spoke their vows in voices devoid of emotion. When the bishop pronounced them husband and wife, Adrian did not kiss her. He merely inclined his head in acknowledgement and turned to sign the marriage register. The witnesses left immediately after. Even they seemed uncomfortable with the funeral atmosphere. Your quarters are in the East Wing, Adrian told her as they walked through corridors lined with portraits of scowling Vale ancestors. His boots echoed on marble floors. My quarters are in the West. There's a formal dining room where we will take dinner together twice weekly as the contract stipulates. You are free to move about the estate, but the lower library, my study, and the West Wing are off limits. The household staff will answer to you for domestic matters. Any questions? Where are the kitchens? He stopped walking, turned to look at her. Why would you need to know that? Because I'd like to know where my food comes from. The staff will bring meals to the dining room. You don't need to concern yourself with... I prefer to know the layout of where I live, Alara interrupted quietly. Humor me. Adrian studied her for a long moment, trying to decide if this was defiance or genuine curiosity. Finally, he gestured down a corridor. Ground floor, south side. The head cook's name is Mrs. Daventry. She's been with the Vale family for 30 years. Thank you. She started to walk in that direction. Adrian caught her arm, the first time he'd touched her since the ceremony. She went rigid. Stay out of my way, he said, voice low and controlled. Follow the rules. We'll coexist peacefully. Break them, and I will make your life considerably more difficult than it already is. Alara looked down at his hand on her arm, then back up at his face. Her dark eyes held something he couldn't quite read, defiance mixed with resignation, anger wrapped in control. I understand perfectly, Your Grace. You've made yourself crystal clear. He released her and walked away without another word. Chet's. The first month was silence. Adrian buried himself in work. The Emperor's latest territorial expansion required careful logistical planning. Supply lines. Troop movements. Political alliances with border lords who changed loyalty like they changed coats. He spent 18 hours a day in his study, reviewing maps and dispatches, calculating variables, eliminating uncertainty. Control was everything. Control meant victory. Control meant survival. He'd learned that lesson at 16 when his own father had died suddenly, leaving him a duchy on the brink of civil war. The family's vassals had immediately tested him, assuming a boy would be weak. Adrian had crushed 3 attempted coups in 6 months, executed 2 traitors, and established such ruthless order that no one had dared challenge him since. Emotion made you weak. Attachment made you vulnerable. He'd watched his mother waste away after his father's death, consumed by grief so profound she forgot to eat, forgot to sleep, forgot she had a son who needed her. She'd died within a year. Adrian swore he would never let feelings destroy him like that. So he built walls, stone and ice and iron discipline, and now those walls extended around his marriage. Alara existed somewhere in the East Wing. He saw her at formal dinners twice a week, Tuesday and Friday, exactly as stipulated, where they ate in near complete silence, exchanged minimal pleasantries, and parted the moment propriety allowed. She wore different dresses, always elegant, but understated. She ate with perfect manners. She never asked personal questions. She was in every way exactly what he'd contracted for. It should have been perfect, but Adrian found himself noticing things. The way she held her fork, not like a noblewoman born to luxury, but like someone who'd been taught to make every movement count. The slight calluses on her fingertips from what? Writing? Playing piano? He couldn't tell. The fact that she read during meals, a small book propped beside her plate, which was technically a breach of etiquette, but one he found himself unwilling to correct because at least it gave her something to focus on besides the oppressive silence. And the way she looked at him sometimes when she thought he wasn't watching, not with anger or resentment, but with a kind of clinical assessment, as if she was trying to solve a puzzle. It bothered him. He didn't want to be interesting to her. He wanted to be a distant figurehead she could ignore. But Alara Montclair, it seemed, did not ignore things. "Your Grace," she said one evening during their third week of marriage, breaking the silence so abruptly he almost dropped his wineglass. "I've been reviewing the household accounts." Adrian set down his fork with careful precision. "That wasn't in your list of duties." Neither was sitting in silence pretending we're both statues. "Yet here we are." Her tone was mild, almost conversational. "The estate is spending nearly 30% more on provisions than it should be. Your head steward is either incompetent or embezzling, possibly both. That's a serious accusation." "It's a mathematical conclusion." She pulled out a small ledger from somewhere in her dress. How long had she been carrying that? And slid it across the table. "The meat costs don't match market rates. The wine expenditures are triple what a household this size should consume. Either you're hosting secret banquets for the entire imperial army or someone is skimming profits." Adrian opened the ledger. His eyes scanned the neat columns of figures, the careful annotations in her precise handwriting. She'd cross-referenced prices with market reports, tracked consumption patterns, built an entire case in less than a month. "Why?" he asked finally. "Why what? Why do you care? This doesn't affect you. You have everything you need: food, shelter, protection. The contract doesn't require you to manage my finances." Alara was quiet for a moment, then, "Because I'm not an idiot, and I'm not useless. I'm trapped in this arrangement the same as you, Your Grace. If I have to be here, I might as well be productive." "I didn't marry you to be productive. I married you to fulfill a legal obligation." "Then consider this a bonus." The faintest hint of sarcasm in her voice. Adrian looked up sharply, but her face remained neutral. Was she mocking him? No one mocked Duke Adrian Vale. "I'll have my accountant review these findings," he said coldly, closing the ledger. "You do that." She returned to her dinner as if the conversation had never happened. Adrian found himself staring at her. This girl, no, woman, who'd been sold to him like property, who had every reason to be bitter and broken, was sitting in his dining room critiquing his household management with the confidence of a seasoned administrator. Who was she? The question lodged in his mind like a splinter. He tried to ignore it, went back to his study, buried himself in work. But 3 days later, his accountant confirmed everything Alara had documented. The head steward was dismissed. Adrian recovered nearly 10,000 in stolen funds. He should have thanked her. He didn't, because thanking her would mean acknowledging she'd been helpful. Acknowledging she'd been helpful meant seeing her as more than a contract fulfillment, and that was a door he couldn't open. But the next time they sat down to dinner, Adrian found himself asking, "How did you learn to manage accounts like that?" Alara looked up from her book, surprised. "My father was already losing money when I was 14. Someone had to keep track of what we had left. It became a necessity. Most noble daughters learn embroidery and dancing. Most noble daughters don't watch their families crumble around them." Her voice was matter-of-fact, not bitter. "When you're drowning, Your Grace, you learn to swim, or you learn to count how many days until you go under." The rawness of that statement hung in the air between them. Adrian took a drink of wine to buy himself time. He should end this conversation, return to safe, neutral silence. But instead he heard himself say, "You could have gone under with dignity. Refuse the marriage. Let your pride stay intact." "Pride doesn't feed my sisters. It doesn't keep them safe." Alara met his eyes. "You think I wanted this? To be purchased like breeding stock? To live in a palace that feels like a prison? But I made a choice. Their survival over my dignity, and I'd make it again." For the first time since his mother's death, Adrian felt something crack in the ice around his chest. This woman was not weak. She was not broken. She was surviving, just like him. "Your sisters," he found himself saying. "They're at the Montclair estate?" "Yes. Lily is 16. Rose is 13. A slight softness entered her voice. "They write to me. The mail arrives Tuesdays." "I know." Alara's eyebrows rose. "You monitor my correspondence?" "I monitor everything in this house." Adrian stood, signaling the end of dinner as usual, but before he left, he paused. "If you'd like them to visit, send word. I'll arrange transport." He walked away before she could respond, before he could see the shock on her face, before he could question why he'd offered something that wasn't in the contract. Behind him, Alara Montclair sat frozen at the table, staring at the empty doorway, trying to understand the man who just revealed the smallest crack in his armor. The visits became monthly occurrences. Lily and Rose would arrive in the Vale carriage, wide-eyed at the fortress estate, and Alara would light up in a way Adrian had never seen. She'd laugh with them in the gardens, walk the grounds, show them the library. For a few precious hours, she'd transform from the silent ghost of the East Wing into someone vibrant and alive. Adrian watched from his study window, telling himself he was merely ensuring security, making sure the visits didn't disrupt household operations. He was lying to himself. He watched because seeing Alara happy did something strange to him, made the fortress feel less like a prison and more like something else, something he didn't have words for. "You're staring again, Your Grace," his secretary Garrett said dryly from the doorway. Adrian turned sharply. "I'm observing estate security." "Of course, that's why you've been observing the same garden path for 20 minutes. But don't you have dispatches to file?" Garrett, one of the few people who'd known Adrian since childhood, just smiled and left. Adrian forced himself away from the window, went back to his desk, tried to focus on the Emperor's latest demands, but his concentration was fractured. This was a problem. Alara was supposed to be invisible. A contract. A legal arrangement. Nothing more. But she kept existing. Kept being intelligent and capable and quietly fierce in ways that made her impossible to ignore. Like last week when she'd attended a minor court function and diplomatically navigated a conversation between two hostile noble houses, preventing what could have become a diplomatic incident. Or the week before, when she'd noticed one of the kitchen maids was ill and personally ensured the girl got medical care, something the household staff was still talking about because apparently the previous Duchess had never acknowledged servants as human beings. Or yesterday, when Adrian had come home late from the Imperial Palace and found a light still burning in the library. He'd gone to investigate and found Alara asleep in a chair, a book on military strategy in her lap. He should have woken her, sent her back to her wing. Instead, he draped his coat over her shoulders and left. This morning, the coat had been returned to his quarters, freshly cleaned with no note or acknowledgement, but it meant she knew. Adrian rubbed his temples, feeling the beginning of a headache. This arrangement was supposed to be simple, cold, controlled. Instead, it was becoming complicated in ways he couldn't calculate or command, and that terrified him more than any battlefield ever had. Everything changed the day Prince Lucian Carrick arrived. Adrian was in his study reviewing troop deployments when Garrett knocked urgently. "Your Grace, Prince Lucien's entourage just entered the estate grounds. He sent no advance notice." Adrian's jaw tightened. Lucien Carrick, third son of the eastern provinces, charming as a snake and twice as dangerous. He'd been campaigning for a military command for years, constantly circling Adrian's success like a vulture hoping for scraps. "How many in his party?" 15, including his personal guard. "Tell the staff to prepare the south guest wing, and find my wife, She'll need to be present for the formal greeting. 15 minutes later, Adrian stood in the main entrance hall, Ilara beside him. She'd changed into a formal gown, deep green silk that actually suited her coloring. Her hair was arranged properly. She looked every inch a duchess. "Who is Prince Lucien?" she asked quietly. "A political liability masquerading as an ally," Adrian replied. "Say as little as possible. Smile. Play the role of dutiful wife. He'll be gone in a few days." The doors opened. Prince Lucien Carrick swept in like he owned the place, all golden hair and perfect teeth and expensive clothes. His smile was designed to disarm, his posture calculated to seem casual while radiating aristocratic power. "Duke Adrian!" Lucien's voice boomed through the hall. "Forgive the unexpected visit. I was passing through on my way to the capital and simply couldn't resist stopping to see the legendary Vale Fortress, and to meet—" His eyes landed on Ilara, and his smile widened. "The new Duchess. My lady, the court has been absolutely buzzing about you." He took Ilara's hand and kissed it with theatrical flair. Adrian felt his jaw clench. "Your Highness," Ilara said smoothly, "you honor us with your presence." "The honor is entirely mine, I assure you. Tell me, how are you finding life as Duchess Vale? The Duke's reputation for strictness precedes him." There was a challenge in those words. A test. Ilara's expression didn't flicker. "My husband's discipline is what makes this estate prosper, Your Highness. I find it quite admirable." Lucien laughed. "Diplomatic and lovely. Duke Adrian, you've found yourself a treasure." "Indeed," Adrian said coldly. "Garrett will show you to your quarters. Dinner will be served at 7. That dinner was an exercise in torture. Lucien dominated the conversation, telling elaborate stories about his travels, his military ambitions, his observations of court politics. He was charming and witty, and paid absolutely too much attention to Ilara, asking her opinions, complimenting her insights, treating her like she was the most fascinating person in the room. And Ilara, damn her, responded. Not flirtatiously, she remained perfectly appropriate. But she engaged, laughed at his jokes, asked thoughtful questions, showed the intelligence and personality that Adrian had been catching glimpses of, but that she'd kept carefully hidden in their cold, contracted marriage. Watching another man draw out his wife's warmth made Adrian want to put his fist through the table. "The Duchess has excellent taste in literature, I see," Lucien was saying, gesturing to the book Ilara had brought to dinner. "Military strategy? An unusual choice for a lady." "I find it fascinating," Ilara replied. "Strategy is just applied logic, isn't it? Understanding patterns, predicting outcomes." "You should see the Duke's war room," Lucien said with a sly smile. "I imagine it would be quite instructive, though I suppose Adrian keeps that locked away from everyone, doesn't he?" The comment was designed to highlight Adrian's coldness, his isolation, his refusal to let anyone close. It worked. "My husband's private spaces are his own," Ilara said evenly. "As are mine. We respect each other's boundaries." "How very modern." Lucien's tone made it sound like an insult disguised as a compliment. Adrian set down his wine glass with enough force that it rang against the table. "If you'll excuse me, I have correspondence to review. Your Highness." "My lady." He left before he could do something unforgivable, like order Lucien off his estate. But as he walked away, he heard Lucien say softly to Ilara, "Forgive me if I'm overstepping, Duchess, but are you happy here?" Adrian stopped walking, stood frozen in the corridor just out of sight, hating himself for eavesdropping, but unable to move. Ilara's response was quiet. "Happiness wasn't part of the contract, Your Highness." "That's not an answer." A long pause. Then, "I'm exactly where I chose to be." The pain in those words struck Adrian like a blade. He forced himself to keep walking, to return to his study, to bury himself in work. But for the first time since building his walls of ice and control, Adrian Vale felt them begin to crack. And he had no idea how to stop it. Prince Lucien stayed 3 days. Each one was worse than the last. He rode through the estate grounds with Ilara, showing her the northern meadows Adrian had never bothered to mention. He played piano in the music room, a space that had sat silent for years until his arrival, while she turned pages, their heads bent close over the sheet music. He walked the gardens with her at sunset, their laughter drifting through open windows to reach Adrian in his study like accusations. And Adrian watched it all happen with the growing certainty that he'd made a catastrophic miscalculation. He'd thought keeping Alara at a distance would protect them both. Instead, he'd left a void that Lucien was more than happy to fill. "Your wife is remarkable," Lucien said on the second evening, catching Adrian alone in the library. The prince's casual tone didn't match the calculation in his eyes. "Intelligent, perceptive, gracious. Tell me, Duke Adrian, how does a man like you end up with a woman like her?" Adrian didn't look up from his book. "A contract, same as any arranged marriage." "Ah, but most contracted marriages at least have the pretense of warmth. You treat her like a particularly well-behaved servant." "My marriage is none of your concern." Lucien moved closer, his voice dropping. "Isn't it? The emperor is very interested in the stability of his most powerful duke. Rumors of coldness, of a loveless political arrangement. These things have a way of undermining confidence, making people wonder if Adrian Vale is as unshakable as he appears." There it was, the real reason for this visit. Adrian closed his book with deliberate calm. "If you have accusations to make, Prince Lucien, make them directly." "No accusations? Merely observations." Lucien smiled that snake's smile. "But I do wonder. If you won't appreciate the treasure you have, perhaps someone else should." The threat was unmistakable. Adrian stood slowly, his height giving him a physical advantage Lucien couldn't match. "Alara is my wife. That means she's under my protection. Anyone who forgets that will discover exactly how unshakable I can be." "Protection implies caring, Your Grace. Does she know you're capable of that?" Lucien left before Adrian could respond, his footsteps echoing down the corridor with infuriating confidence. Adrian stood alone in the library, hands clenched at his sides, rage simmering beneath his carefully controlled surface. The prince was right, damn him. Alara didn't know Adrian was capable of caring because Adrian had spent months ensuring she believed the opposite, and now he was paying the price. That night, Adrian couldn't sleep. He paced his quarters like a caged wolf, trying to calculate his next move. This should be simple strategy: identify the threat, neutralize it, restore order. But nothing about this situation followed the rules of warfare he'd mastered. Near midnight, he heard music drifting from the music room. Piano played with skill and emotion. Not Lucien's theatrical style, but something gentler, sadder. Alara. Adrian found himself walking toward the sound before he'd consciously decided to move. He stopped in the doorway, hidden in shadow, watching his wife play a nocturne by moonlight. She wore a simple dressing gown, her hair loose around her shoulders, the first time he'd seen it unbound. She looked younger like this, vulnerable, and heartbreakingly alone. The music ended. Alara's hands fell to her lap. "You can come in," she said without turning around. "I know you're there." Adrian hesitated, then stepped into the room. "I didn't mean to disturb you." "You're not." She finally looked at him, her expression unreadable in the dim light. "Can't sleep?" "Work." Liar. The word was soft, almost gentle, but it hit like a slap. Adrian stiffened. "Excuse me?" "You're not working, Your Grace. You're thinking. There's a difference." Alara turned back to the piano, running her fingers silently over the keys. "I can always tell. You get this look like you're fighting a battle inside your own head. You don't know me well enough to make that assessment." "Don't I?" She played a single note, let it fade. "I've lived in your house for 3 months, eaten meals across from you, watched you navigate political functions, seen how you interact with your staff, your allies, your enemies. You think I haven't been paying attention?" Adrian moved closer despite himself. "And what have you concluded from all this observation?" "That you're terrified." The words struck something deep. Adrian's voice went cold and dangerous. "Choose your next words carefully, Duchess." "You asked." Alara met his eyes with that same fearless directness she'd shown the day they met. "You're terrified of feeling anything, of being vulnerable, of letting anyone close enough to matter. So you build these elaborate walls and rules and call it strength. But it's not strength, Your Grace. It's cowardice dressed up in discipline." You know nothing about me. I know you lost your mother young, that your father's death forced you to become a man before you were ready, that you've spent your entire adult life proving you're invincible because you're terrified of being weak like she was. Alara's voice softened. I know because I recognize it. I do the same thing. We're more alike than you want to admit. Adrian felt like she'd reached into his chest and squeezed his heart with bare hands. Don't compare yourself to me. Why not? We're both survivors pretending we don't bleed. I'm not pretending anything. I simply don't. He stopped, unable to finish the lie. Don't what? Don't feel? Alara stood, moved toward him. Then why have you been watching me with Prince Lucian like you want to tear him apart? Why did you offer to let my sisters visit when it wasn't in the contract? Why did you cover me with your coat in the library? You noticed that? Of course I noticed. She stopped just out of arm's reach, close enough that Adrian could see the moonlight reflecting in her eyes. You're not as good at being cold as you think you are, Adrian Vale. Not with me. Hearing his name from her lips, not your grace, but his actual name, did something dangerous to his control. Lucian leaves tomorrow, Adrian said, voice rough. After that, things return to normal. Normal, Alara laughed without humor. You mean silent dinners and separate wings and pretending we're not both slowly suffocating in this arrangement? It's what we agreed to. It's what you demanded. I just didn't have the luxury of refusing. The bitterness in her voice was like acid. Adrian wanted to defend himself, to explain that distance was protection, that caring led to weakness, but the words died in his throat because she was right. He'd given her no choice, made her a prisoner dressed in silk, and called it salvation. What do you want from me? The question came out harsher than he intended. Alara looked at him for a long moment, something achingly sad crossing her face. I want you to be honest. Just once. Tell me the truth. Am I really nothing more than a contract to you? Because if that's all this is, I can accept it. But don't pretend to care when you don't. That's crueler than the coldness. Adrian stood frozen, trapped between the truth and the walls he'd spent a lifetime building. He should say yes, should confirm that she was nothing, meant nothing, would always mean nothing. But he couldn't. You're not nothing, he finally said, the words feeling like broken glass in his throat. Then what am I? I don't know. The honesty of it seemed to surprise them both. Alara's breath caught. Adrian took a step back, needing distance, needing to regain the control that was slipping through his fingers like water. I should let you sleep, he said stiffly. Adrian, good night, Duchess. He left before she could stop him, before he could say something else he couldn't take back, before the walls crumbled completely. Behind him, Alara stood alone in the moonlight, pressing her hand against her chest where her heart was breaking for a man too scared to let himself be loved. Bam! Prince Lucien departed the next afternoon with all the ceremony his rank required. Adrian stood in the courtyard, rigid and proper, while Lucien made his farewells. When the prince took Alara's hand to kiss it goodbye, he held it just a fraction too long. I hope we meet again soon, Duchess, Lucien said, his voice carrying implications that made Adrian's jaw clench. Perhaps at the Imperial Gala next month. I would be honored to claim a dance. Perhaps, Alara replied neutrally, but as Lucien mounted his horse, he looked directly at Adrian and smiled. It was the smile of a man who'd successfully planted seeds of chaos and was eager to watch them grow. The entourage rode away in a cloud of dust and jingling harnesses. The moment they were out of sight, Adrian turned and walked back into the fortress without a word. Your Grace, Garrett called after him, the trade delegation from the northern provinces arrives in an hour. You need to review their proposals. Cancel it. Sir? Cancel it. Reschedule? I don't care. Adrian kept walking. He made it to his study, slammed the door, and stood gripping the edge of his desk with white-knuckled hands. Control was slipping. The ice was cracking. Everything he'd built to protect himself was collapsing under the weight of one undeniable truth. He cared about Alara, not as a contract, not as a convenient political arrangement, as a person, as a woman, as someone who'd somehow slipped past every defense he'd erected and made herself matter. And Lucien knew it. The bastard had seen it and was already weaponizing that weakness. A knock on the door interrupted his spiral. "I said cancel everything," Adrian barked. The door opened anyway. Alara stepped inside. "Your staff doesn't take orders from me," she said, closing the door behind her with quiet finality. "But you're going to listen to me anyway." "This isn't the time." "When would be the time? Next month? Next year? When you finally perfected the art of pretending I don't exist?" Alara crossed her arms. "Prince Lucien just spent 3 days in our home, paying more attention to me than my own husband has in 3 months. And you think I don't know what that means?" "It means he's a political opportunist trying to undermine me." "It means you've been so busy protecting yourself that you forgot I'm actually here." Her voice rose with frustration. "I'm not a ghost, Adrian. I'm not furniture. I'm a human being who has needs and feelings, and I am so tired of living like I'm already dead." The rawness in her voice stopped him cold. "What do you want from me?" he asked again, quieter this time. "I want you to fight for this marriage the way you fight for everything else." Alara moved closer, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "You're a brilliant strategist. You conquer territories and win political battles and command absolute loyalty from your people. But you won't fight for the woman who lives in your own house. Why?" "Because I don't know how." The admission cost him everything. Adrian saw the shock register on Alara's face, that the great Duke Adrian Vale, terror of the battlefield and master of political intrigue, was confessing helplessness. "Then learn," she said softly. "We both made choices that led us here. But we can choose differently now. Unless you really don't feel anything, in which case tell me plainly, and I'll stop hoping for something that will never exist." Adrian looked at his wife, truly looked at her, and felt the last of his control shatter. "I watched my mother destroy herself with grief after my father died. She loved him so completely that when he was gone, she couldn't remember how to exist. I swore I would never let emotion make me that weak. Love isn't weakness. It was for her. It killed her as surely as any blade." "No," Alara shook her head. "Losing him killed her, but the love itself? That's what gave her life meaning before he died. Would you really choose never to feel anything just to avoid the risk of loss? It's kept me alive this long." "No, it's kept you isolated. There's a difference." She reached out, almost touching his hand but stopping just short. "I'm not asking you to be weak, Adrian. I'm asking you to be brave enough to try." The space between them felt charged with possibility and terror. Adrian stared at her outstretched hand, knowing that if he took it, everything would change. The walls would fall. The control would vanish. He'd be vulnerable in ways he'd spent decades avoiding. But the alternative was watching Lucien or someone like him take what Adrian had been too afraid to claim. Slowly, Adrian reached out and took her hand. The touch was electric. Alara's breath hitched. Adrian's thumb brushed across her knuckles, feeling the calluses he'd noticed before, the proof that she'd worked and struggled and survived. "I don't know how to do this," he said quietly. "Neither do I. But we can figure it out together." For a moment, they stood like that, hands clasped, barriers dissolving, both terrified and exhilarated. Then Garrett burst through the door. "Your Grace, urgent news from the capital." He stopped short, seeing them standing close, hands joined. "My apologies, I'll return." "What news?" Adrian didn't let go of Alara's hand. Garrett's expression turned grim. "The Emperor has called an emergency council. All high-ranking nobility must attend the Imperial Gala next month. Mandatory. No exceptions." Adrian felt ice reform around his chest. Why? There are whispers of a succession crisis. The Emperor's health is failing faster than anticipated. Prince Lucien is already positioning himself as the next military commander-in-chief. Garrett glanced at Alara, clearly uncomfortable. He's also been spreading rumors about instability in the Vale Duchy, specifically about your marriage. Alara's hand tightened in Adrian's. What kind of rumors? That the Duke's famous control is slipping. That the marriage is a sham that proves he's losing his grip on power. That perhaps the Emperor should reconsider who holds the highest military authority. Adrian's mind raced through calculations. This was an attack on multiple fronts, personal and political. Lucien hadn't just been visiting for pleasure. He'd been gathering intelligence, testing weaknesses, preparing ammunition, and he'd found it. The crack in Adrian's armor had a name: Ilara. The gala is in 3 weeks, Garrett continued. The entire imperial court will be there. Every eye will be on you both. Then we'll give them a show they won't forget, Adrian said coldly. After Garrett left, Ilara looked up at Adrian with worry clear on her face. He's using me to destroy you. He's trying to. I won't let that happen. Adrian almost smiled, almost. You think you can stop a prince? I think we can stop him. Together. She squeezed his hand. You said you don't know how to do this, how to be married for real instead of on paper. Well, here's your first lesson. You're not alone anymore. When someone attacks you, they attack us both. And I fight for what's mine. Something fierce and possessive ignited in Adrian's chest. I'm yours? Aren't you? The question hung between them, loaded with meaning. Adrian thought about the contract they'd signed, the rules they'd established, the cold distance they'd maintained. Then he thought about the last 3 days of watching another man make his wife smile while he stood frozen by his own fear. Yes, he said finally. I am. Ilara's smile was like sunrise after a long winter. Then let's show Prince Lucien what happens when he underestimates us both. The next 3 weeks transformed the Vale estate. Adrian abandoned his careful distance. They took meals together daily now, not just the contractual twice-weekly dinners. He showed her his war room, spreading maps and explaining strategies while she asked questions that made him see old problems from new angles. She reorganized his household accounts with ruthless efficiency, uncovering 2 more embezzlers and increasing estate productivity by 20%. They walked the grounds together at sunset, played chess in the library, talked about everything from military history to her sister's education to the books they'd both read as children. Slowly, carefully, they learned each other. But the specter of the imperial gala loomed over everything. Adrian received reports daily about Lucien's maneuvering, alliances being formed, whispers being spread, political pressure being applied. The prince was building a coalition, positioning himself as the reliable alternative to the unstable Duke Vale. He's saying you're distracted, Garrett reported one evening, that your sudden attention to your wife proves you've lost focus on your duties. If I ignore her, I'm cold and unfit for leadership. If I acknowledge her, I'm distracted. Adrian threw the dispatch across his desk. He's constructed a trap where any move we make proves his point. Then don't play his game, Ilara said from the doorway. She'd taken to joining these evening briefings, her insights often sharper than Adrian's advisors. Make him play yours. How? She walked to the map of the imperial palace spread across his desk. The gala is about perception. Lucien's betting that showing interest in me makes you look weak. So we show them something else. That the great Adrian Vale chose a partner worthy of his respect. That our marriage isn't a weakness, but a strategic alliance that makes us both stronger. The court won't believe we suddenly fell in love, Garrett pointed out. No, Ilara agreed, but they'll believe we've found mutual respect, admiration, partnership. Those things are actually more powerful in the nobility than romantic love. Love is common. An equal partnership? That's rare. Adrian studied her with growing appreciation. You've been thinking about this. I've been thinking about little else. She met his eyes. I meant what I said, Adrian. I fight for what's mine. And this marriage, this life we're building, is mine now. I won't let Lucien take it. The possessiveness in her voice sent heat through Adrian's veins. He moved around the desk, coming to stand close to her, close enough to see the determination in her dark eyes, the slight flush on her cheeks, the way her breath quickened when he invaded her space. We'll need to be convincing, he said quietly. The court watches everything, every glance, every gesture. They'll be looking for cracks. Then we'll give them a unified front. That means you'll have to let me touch you, dance with you, stand close to you in ways that suggest... He trailed off, suddenly aware that they were crossing a threshold they couldn't uncross. Intimacy, Ilara finished. I'm not afraid of that, Adrian. The question is, are you? Garrett cleared his throat awkwardly. I'll just, leave these dispatches for morning review. He fled. Elara and Adrian barely noticed. Everything I've done to keep distance between us, Adrian said, was to protect us both. Opening that door. The door is already open. Lucien's attack guaranteed it. Elara reached up, her hand hovering near his face. We can't go back to separate wings and silent dinners. Not now. So we move forward. Together. Adrian caught her hand, pressed it against his chest where his heart was pounding. I'm still learning how. I know. So am I. Her smile was soft, genuine. But we have 3 weeks to practice before the gala. Think you can manage to appear devoted to your wife by then? I can manage. His voice dropped. The appearing part might be harder than you think. Alara's eyes widened slightly as she caught his meaning, that pretending to care was becoming less of an act with every passing day. Then we're in trouble, she whispered. Yes. Adrian pulled her closer, crossing another invisible line. We are. The distance between them evaporated. Adrian could see every detail of her face, the slight freckles across her nose, the determination in her eyes, the way her lips parted slightly as she looked up at him. It would be so easy to kiss her, to stop pretending this was just political strategy. But a lifetime of control held him back. Not yet. Not when he was still learning how to feel without drowning. Instead, he pressed his lips to her forehead, a gesture of promise rather than passion.
3 weeks, he said. We'll be ready.
Elara nodded, her hand still pressed against his racing heart. Together. The word felt like a vow.
The preparations for the gala consumed them both.
Elara worked with the estate seamstress on a gown designed to make a statement. Elegant, but not submissive. Powerful, but not aggressive. Adrian trained with his dancing master, relearning courtly dances he hadn't bothered with in years. They practiced together in the ballroom, moving through waltzes and formal court dances while Adrian tried not to focus on how perfectly Elara fit in his arms. You're tense, she observed during one session. I'm concentrating. You're overthinking. She smiled up at him. Just feel the music. Trust me to follow. Trust. Such a simple word, such an impossible thing. But Adrian tried. Let himself focus on the rhythm, on the warmth of Elara's hand in his, on the way she moved with surprising grace despite claiming she'd never been properly trained. Where did you learn to dance like this? He asked. My mother. Before everything fell apart. Sadness flickered across her face. She said a woman needed to be able to move through any room with confidence, even if her world was crumbling around her. She sounds remarkable. She was. Elara's voice softened. She would have liked you, I think. Would have seen past the walls to who you really are. And who is that? Someone who cares so deeply he has to pretend not to feel anything at all. Someone who's been hurt and decided never to risk it again. Someone who's strong enough to conquer kingdoms but terrified of his own heart. Adrian stopped dancing. They stood in the center of the empty ballroom, the only sound their combined breathing. You see too much, he said, or maybe you hide too little. From me, anyway. She was right. Somehow, this woman he'd married as a contract had become the one person who could read him like a military map. It should have terrified him. Instead, it felt like relief. When we walk into that gala, Adrian said, Lucien will try everything to provoke me, to make me lose control in front of the entire court. Then don't let him. If he touches you, he won't. Elara placed her hand against his chest, right over his heart. Because you'll be there, and everyone will see that the Duke and Duchess Vale are a united force, that we're stronger together than Lucien could ever be alone. Adrian covered her hand with his. I've commanded armies, negotiated with emperors, crushed rebellions. But standing in that ballroom with you, pretending we're just another noble couple, that might be the hardest battle I've ever fought. Why? Because it won't be pretending, not anymore. The confession hung between them, raw and honest. Elara's eyes widened, her breath catching. Adrian! A commotion erupted in the entrance hall, shouting, running feet, the clash of steel. Adrian's military instincts snapped into focus. He grabbed Elara's arm and pulled her behind him as Garrett burst through the ballroom doors. Your Grace, armed men at the north gate. They're wearing Lucian's colors. Adrian's blood ran cold. An attack. Here. Now. How many? 20, maybe more. They're demanding entrance in the prince's name. Demanding? Adrian's voice went deadly calm. This is my estate. No one demands anything here. He started for the door, but Ilara grabbed his arm. This is the provocation. Lucian wants you to react violently, to prove you're unstable. They're armed men trying to force their way into my home, and if you meet them with violence, you play right into his hands. Ilara's grip tightened. Think, Adrian, this is just like your war room strategies. What would you do if this were a battlefield? Adrian forced himself to breathe, to calculate instead of react. She was right. This was a test. Lucian was gambling that Adrian's newfound protectiveness would override his legendary control. Get the house guard to the north gate, Adrian ordered Garrett. Defensive positions only. No one engages unless I give the order. And send for the imperial magistrate immediately. I want witnesses that I'm handling this legally. And you? Garrett asked. I'm going to greet our uninvited guests, with my Duchess beside me. Ilara straightened, her expression hardening into something formidable. Let's show them what a united front looks like. They walked to the north gate together, Adrian in full military dress, Ilara in her practical day gown that somehow made her look more regal than any elaborate costume. The household guard had formed defensive ranks. Behind them, 20 men in Lucian's colors sat mounted, hands on weapons. Their leader, a captain with a scarred face, sneered when he saw Adrian. Duke Vale, His Highness Prince Lucian sent us to collect his property. There is no property of the prince's on my estate, Adrian replied coldly. Books, 6 volumes borrowed from the Imperial Library. The prince requires their return immediately. It was obvious theater. Books were an excuse. The real purpose was to create an incident to force Adrian into either compliance or violence. Books can be sent through normal channels, Adrian said. Our orders are to retrieve them now, by force if necessary. The men behind the captain shifted their hands to weapons. The household guard tensed. One wrong move and blood would spill on Vale soil, exactly what Lucian wanted. Ilara stepped forward before Adrian could respond. Captain, she said, her voice carrying clear authority, I am Duchess Vale. You will address me with proper respect or leave these grounds immediately. The captain blinked, clearly unprepared for the Duchess to speak. My lady, my orders. Your orders are irrelevant. You've come armed to a private estate without invitation. That's not a retrieval. That's an act of aggression. She moved closer to the gate, fearless. Now, I know Prince Lucian personally. We enjoyed his company during his recent visit. I'm quite certain he would be mortified to know his men were threatening violence over library books. Unless, she paused dramatically, unless he actually did order you to create an incident, in which case you're all complicit in an illegal attack on a duke's estate, a crime the emperor takes very seriously. The captain's confidence wavered. Around them, the household guard stood ready, and several estate workers had gathered to watch. Witnesses. Evidence. We just want the books, the captain said, less certainly. Then you'll wait while they're retrieved and delivered properly. Ilara glanced at Garrett. Send a servant to collect the volumes Prince Lucian borrowed. Take your time. Make an inventory. Document everything. Garrett smiled grimly and left. You'll be waiting here, Ilara continued to the captain. Outside the gate, under observation. If you make any threatening moves, we have 30 witnesses and the imperial magistrate has been summoned. You'll be arrested for assault on noble property. Your choice, Captain. The captain looked between Ilara's calm confidence and Adrian's cold rage, clearly calculating odds. Finally, he backed his horse up. We'll wait. Excellent decision. Ilara turned and walked back toward the house, her spine straight, her head high. Adrian followed, suppressing the urge to either kiss her or execute every man who'd dared threaten his home. Once they were inside, out of sight, Adrian grabbed her shoulders. That was incredibly dangerous. That was necessary. You would have fought them. Yes. And it would have been exactly what Lucian wanted, proof that you're violent and unstable. Ilara's eyes blazed with triumph. Instead, we have witnesses to them bringing armed men to our estate. We have documentation of their aggression, and the imperial magistrate will file a formal complaint. Lucien's plan just backfired spectacularly. Adrian stared at his wife. This woman who'd been sold to him like property and had just outmaneuvered a prince's attack with pure strategic brilliance. "You're magnificent," he said. Alara's breath caught. "I'm practical." "No." Adrian pulled her closer, past caring about control or distance or fear. "You're magnificent, and you're mine." "Yes," she whispered, "I am." This time, when Adrian kissed her forehead, it lingered. A promise. A claim. An acknowledgement that the walls had finally crumbled completely. Outside, the imperial magistrate arrived to document Lucien's failed provocation. The books were delivered with excessive ceremony. The captain and his men left in humiliation. And inside the Vale fortress, Adrian Vale held his wife and realized he'd been fighting the wrong battle all along. The real war wasn't against emotion. It was against the fear that had kept him from living. The gala was 2 weeks away. Lucien would try again, harder and more dangerous. But this time, Adrian wouldn't be facing it alone. The imperial palace blazed with 1,000 candles the night of the gala, their light reflecting off gilded walls and crystal chandeliers until the entire structure seemed to glow like a jewel against the dark sky. Carriages lined the grand approach, disgorging nobles in their finest silks and jewels, each one performing their status for an audience that judged every detail. Adrian's carriage was the last to arrive, a calculated decision that ensured maximum attention. When the doors opened, he stepped out first, extending his hand back toward the interior. The crowd hushed, craning to see the Duchess they'd heard so much about. Alara emerged like a weapon disguised as art. Her gown was midnight blue silk that caught the light like deep water, cut to emphasize strength rather than delicacy. No excessive jewels, no desperate decoration, just clean lines and perfect tailoring that announced she had nothing to prove. Her hair was arranged in an elegant updo that revealed the proud line of her neck, the determined set of her jaw. She looked like a duchess who commanded respect, not pleaded for it. Adrian felt pride surge through his chest as she took his arm. Together they walked toward the palace entrance while whispers erupted around them like wildfire. "They say the Duke has gone soft for her. I heard he nearly started a war over library books. Prince Lucien claims the marriage is a facade. Does she look like a facade to you?" Alara's grip on Adrian's arm tightened almost imperceptibly. He covered her hand with his, a gesture of reassurance and possession that the watching nobles immediately noted. "Breathe," he murmured. We're not prey. We're predators." "I thought we were partners. Predators can hunt in pairs." Her quiet laugh drew more stares. The Duke and Duchess Vale, actually speaking to each other with apparent affection? The scandal. They entered the grand ballroom where the Emperor's gala was already in full swing. 200 nobles circulated through a space designed to overwhelm, marble columns soaring 3 stories high, murals depicting imperial conquests covering every surface, musicians playing from a golden gallery above. It was a display of power meant to remind everyone exactly where they stood in the hierarchy. At the far end, on a raised dais, sat Emperor Hadrian IV, looking far worse than the last time Adrian had seen him. The ruler's face was gaunt, his skin gray, his hands trembling slightly as he lifted his wine glass. The succession crisis wasn't whispered speculation anymore. It was visible reality. And beside the emperor's throne stood Prince Lucien, resplendent in crimson and gold, his smile confident as he surveyed the room like he already owned it. His eyes found Alara immediately. Something predatory flashed across his face before he smoothed it into charm. "He's watching us," Alara said quietly. "Let him watch." Adrian guided her deeper into the crowd. "We're here to show unity. Remember the plan." The plan was simple. Be visible, be together, be undeniably strong. Circulate through the ballroom making strategic conversations. Dance together. Show the court that the rumors of instability were manufactured lies. It should have been straightforward, but Adrian had underestimated how much Lucien was willing to risk. They'd barely completed one circuit of the room when Lord Ashford, One of Lucien's known allies intercepted them. Duke Adrian, Duchess Alara, what a pleasure. Ashford's smile was all teeth. I must say, Duchess, you look remarkably composed for someone whose family was nearly destroyed by scandal. Tell me, how does it feel to be purchased like livestock? The insult was deliberate, designed to provoke. Around them, conversation stopped as nobles turned to watch the confrontation. Adrian's hand went to his sword hilt instinctively, but Alara spoke first. Lord Ashford, how fascinating that you'd ask such a question in public. Her voice was light, almost amused. Though I suppose when one's own marriage is reportedly loveless and primarily motivated by the need to access their spouse's fortune, one might project their own insecurities onto others. How is Lady Ashford, by the way? I understand she spends most of her time at her family's estate, away from you. Ashford's face went purple. The nobles within earshot gasped at the boldness of throwing that particular scandal back in his face. You dare! I dare quite a lot when insulted at an imperial function, Alara interrupted smoothly. Now, was there something substantive you wished to discuss, or were you simply looking to embarrass yourself further? Adrian felt something fierce and hot burn through his chest. His wife had just verbally eviscerated a lord in front of half the court without raising her voice or losing composure. Ashford stammered something incoherent and retreated. The watching nobles erupted in whispered conversations, half scandalized, half impressed. That was, Adrian began, necessary. Alara's hand was shaking slightly on his arm despite her calm exterior. They're going to keep testing us. We can't show weakness. That wasn't weakness. That was magnificent. She looked up at him with surprise, and Adrian realized he'd said it loud enough for the people around them to hear. Good. Let them hear. Dance with me, he said suddenly. What? Dance with me. Now. Show them we're not intimidated. The orchestra was playing a waltz. Adrian led Alara onto the dance floor, aware that every eye in the ballroom had turned toward them. They took position, and for a moment the world narrowed to just the two of them. His hand at her waist, her hand in his, moving together with the practice they'd done in the Vale ballroom. You're different tonight, Alara observed quietly. More present. I spent months trying not to see you, Adrian admitted. I think I'm done with that. What changed? Watching you face down those soldiers, listening to you destroy Ashford with words sharper than any blade, realizing that I've been treating you like a weakness when you're actually the strongest person I know. Alara's breath caught. Adrian, I'm still learning how to do this, he said. How to be a husband instead of just a duke. But I want to learn. With you. Her eyes were bright with emotion. That's all I've wanted to hear. They moved through the waltz, and for those few minutes nothing else existed. Not the watching court, not Lucian's schemes, not the political dangers surrounding them. Just two people finally allowing themselves to feel what they'd been fighting for months. When the music ended, Adrian did something he'd never done in public. He lifted Alara's hand and kissed it, his eyes never leaving hers. The gesture was intimate, possessive, unmistakably real. The ballroom erupted in whispers, and across the room Prince Lucien's expression went cold with rage. They'd barely stepped off the dance floor when a servant approached with a silver tray bearing a sealed letter. For the Duchess Vale. Urgent. Alara took it, frowning, broke the seal. Read. All color drained from her face. What is it? Adrian demanded. She handed him the letter with shaking hands. Adrian read, his rage building with every word. Your sisters have been taken into protective custody by order of Prince Lucien. Their safety depends on your cooperation. Come to the West Terrace alone in 10 minutes, or they will face charges of conspiracy against the crown. Adrian crumpled the letter in his fist. This is a trap. It's my sisters. Alara's voice was steady, but her eyes were terrified. I have to go. You can't go alone. This is exactly what he wants. To separate us, to get you vulnerable. Then what do I do? Let Lily and Rose be arrested on false charges? You know what happens to traitors. They'll be executed. Adrian's mind raced through options, each one worse than the last. If Alara went alone, Lucian could do anything, harm her, coerce her, use her as leverage. If Adrian went with her, they'd both be vulnerable. If they refused, innocent girls would die. There were no good choices. We go together, Adrian decided. Publicly. We make Lucian face us in front of witnesses. He won't negotiate with witnesses present. Then we call his bluff. Your sisters aren't actually in custody. This is a ploy to isolate you. Lucian's gambled that you care enough about family to take risks. We show him you're smarter than that.
Alara pressed her hand to her chest, breathing hard. If you're wrong, if he actually has them. He doesn't. I've had security watching your sisters since Lucian's visit. They're at the Montclair estate under guard. This letter is a lie designed to manipulate you. Relief flooded Alara's face, followed immediately by fury. He used my sisters as bait. Yes, and now we're going to make him pay for it. They walked toward the West Terrace together, not alone as the letter demanded, but flanked by two of Adrian's most trusted guards. Let Lucian see they weren't playing by his rules. The terrace overlooked the palace gardens, currently empty of guests, lit only by strategic torches that created more shadows than light. Prince Lucian waited there with three of his men, his expression shifting from confident to annoyed when he saw Adrian. I believe my letter specified the Duchess come alone, Lucian said coldly. Your letter was built on lies, Adrian replied. Her sisters are safe at their estate. Try again, Your Highness. Lucien's mask of charm cracked completely, revealing the calculating predator beneath. You've become predictable, Duke Adrian, so focused on protecting your little wife that you've stopped thinking strategically. I'm thinking perfectly clearly. You've overplayed your hand. Have I? Lucien moved closer, his voice dropping to something dangerous. You think you've won because you dance prettily and make declarations in front of the court? That's theater. Meanwhile, I've been building real power. The emperor is dying. The military needs new leadership. And the consensus among the generals is that Adrian Vale has gone soft. The generals follow me because I win battles. That hasn't changed. No? Then why did you refuse the northern campaign last week? The emperor asked you specifically to lead the expansion, and you declined. First time in your career you've turned down a command. Lucian's smile was vicious. Because you didn't want to leave your Duchess behind. That's not strength. That's weakness wearing a crown. Adrian felt the trap snap shut around them. He had declined that command for exactly the reason Lucian stated. The campaign would have meant months away from the estate, and after finally beginning to build something real with Alara, the thought of leaving had been unbearable. But admitting that meant admitting vulnerability. My decisions are my own, Adrian said carefully. Your decisions affect the Empire. Lucian turned to Alara, his expression shifting to mock sympathy. Tell me, Duchess, are you worth the destruction of your husband's career? Because that's what's happening. Adrian Vale, the Emperor's greatest military mind, reduced to a lovesick fool who won't leave home. How romantic. How pathetic. Don't speak to her, Adrian growled. Why? Because you can't stand hearing the truth? You've compromised everything you built for a woman you purchased out of pity. Lucien's voice rose, projecting toward the ballroom where people were beginning to drift toward the open terrace doors drawn by raised voices. The legendary Duke Vale, destroyed by the oldest weakness in history, attachment to something he can't control. More nobles appeared on the terrace. The scene Lucien was orchestrating with perfect precision, Adrian looking possessive and irrational, Lucien appearing calm and reasonable. This is pointless, Adrian said, taking Alara's arm. We're leaving. Oh, you're not leaving yet. Lucien gestured, and his guards moved to block the path. You see, Duke Adrian, I did some research into the Montclair family. Very thorough research. And I discovered something fascinating. Warning bells screamed in Adrian's mind. Whatever you think you've found, Lord Montclair's debts weren't from gambling. Lucien pulled a document from his coat. They were from funding a rebel group plotting against the emperor. Treason. Your wife's father was a traitor, which makes her family traitors, which makes your marriage an alliance with enemies of the crown. The words hit like a physical blow. Around them, the gathered nobles gasped. Alara went rigid beside Adrian. That's a lie, she said, but her voice wavered. Is it? Lucien unfolded the document, showing what appeared to be bank records. Duke Adrian, did you investigate your bride's family before purchasing her? Or were you so eager to fulfill the emperor's marriage decree that you didn't bother checking her background? Adrian's mind raced. He had investigated.
Standard background checks, financial records. But he'd been focused on the gambling debts, not looking deeper because the Montclairs had seemed like typical fallen nobility. If Lucien had discovered actual treason ties... My father gambled, Ilara said firmly. He was a fool with money, not a traitor. Your father was both, Lucien's voice carried to every watching noble.
And now Duke Adrian has tied himself to a treasonous family. His marriage is not just weak, it's illegal, a threat to imperial security. You manufactured this evidence, Adrian said coldly. This is fabrication. Then let's bring it before the Emperor, right now. Let him decide if the evidence is real. Lucien smiled. Of course, if it's proven true, the Montclair family will be arrested immediately. All of them. Including your young sisters, Duchess. And Duke Adrian will have committed the crime of harboring traitors. The trap was perfect. If they challenged the evidence and it somehow held up an investigation, whether legitimately or through Lucien's manipulation, Ilara's entire family would be destroyed and Adrian would be implicated. If they didn't challenge it, the accusation would spread through court as fact, destroying their credibility anyway. Ilara was trembling. My sisters are innocent. Then prove your father's innocence, publicly, right now. Lucien gestured toward the ballroom where the Emperor sat watching with keen interest despite his illness. Denounce your father's crimes, divorce your treasonous wife, Duke Adrian, and I'll arrange for the younger Montclair girls to be spared. They can live quietly in exile. All you have to do is admit your marriage was a mistake built on lies. The crowd waited, silent and hungry for drama. Adrian looked at Ilara, his wife, his partner, the woman he'd finally allowed himself to care about, and saw devastation in her eyes. Do it, she whispered. Save my sisters. No. Adrian, please. No. He turned to face Lucien fully, his voice carrying across the terrace with absolute authority. You want me to choose between my wife and my reputation? Fine. I choose her. Every time. Without hesitation. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Lucien's expression twisted. You'd commit career suicide for a woman you married as a contract? She stopped being a contract the moment she walked into my life and refused to be invisible. Adrian pulled Ilara closer to his side. You've built this entire scheme on the assumption that attachment makes me weak. You're wrong. She makes me stronger, smarter, better at everything I do because I finally have something worth fighting for beyond duty and obligation. How touching, Lucien sneered. And how utterly irrelevant. The evidence of treason is fabricated, a new voice interrupted, and I can prove it. Garrett emerged from the ballroom, followed by 2 imperial magistrates and a man Adrian recognized as the Emperor's chief investigator. They carried their own documents, and Garrett's expression was grimly triumphant. Your Grace, Your Highness. Garrett addressed them both formally. The investigation you requested 2 weeks ago has concluded. Adrian nearly smiled. 2 weeks ago, after Lucien's armed men had tried to provoke an incident, Adrian had quietly commissioned a full investigation into the prince's activities. Insurance. What investigation? Lucien demanded, his confidence faltering. The chief investigator stepped forward. Duke Vale suspected Prince Lucien was manufacturing evidence of crimes to undermine political rivals. We've been tracking your financial payments, Your Highness, including payments to forgers, bribed officials, and the fabrication of documents. He held up the papers Garrett had brought, including these false bank records accusing Lord Montclair of treason. The terrace erupted in shocked whispers. That's absurd, Lucien snapped. I would never... We have testimony from 3 different forgers who identify you as their employer. The investigator's voice was implacable. We have bank transfers traced directly to your accounts. And we have documentation that Lord Montclair's debts were exactly what they appeared. Gambling losses, not treason funding. You fabricated evidence against an innocent family to destroy Duke Adrian's marriage. Lucien's face went white, then red with fury. This is a setup. Adrian orchestrated this to protect my wife from false accusations? Adrian's voice was ice. Yes, I did. Because unlike you, I actually care about the people I claim to protect. The Emperor stirred on his distant throne, gesturing weakly. An aide rushed to his side, then called out. His Imperial Majesty demands Prince Lucien present himself immediately for questioning. Lucien looked around wildly, realizing the trap had sprung on him instead of Adrian. His guards shifted nervously. The nobles were already backing away from him, not wanting to be associated with someone caught in fabrication and treason. "You'll regret this," Lucien hissed at Adrian. "I'll destroy you." "You tried. You failed." Adrian's voice carried absolute finality. "Now, face the consequences." Imperial guards arrived to escort Lucien to the Emperor. The prince went, his face contorted with rage and humiliation. His career likely ended before the night was over. The crowd dispersed slowly, buzzing with the scandal. Duke Adrian Vale had just publicly declared his devotion to his wife and exposed a prince's corruption in the same breath. It would be talked about for years. Adrian and Alara stood alone on the terrace as the commotion faded. "You investigated Lucien," Alara said quietly. "You prepared for this." "I learned from you. Anticipate the attack. Have evidence ready. Don't let emotion override strategy." Adrian turned to face her. "But I also learned something else. Sometimes the strategic choice and the emotional choice are the same. Protecting you was both. You risked everything. I risked nothing. Because losing you would have been worse than losing everything else combined." He cupped her face in his hands. "I'm done pretending attachment is weakness. You are my strength, Alara, and I'm never letting you go." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I love you." The words hung in the air between them, raw and honest and terrifying. Adrian had spent his whole life avoiding this moment, the vulnerability, the admission, the complete surrender of control. But looking at Alara's tear-stained face, feeling the rightness of her in his arms, he realized control had been the real weakness all along. "I love you too," he said, the words unfamiliar but true. "I fought it for so long because I was afraid. But you were right. Love isn't what destroyed my mother. Losing love destroyed her, and I refuse to live in fear of loss anymore." Alara laughed through her tears. "The great Duke Adrian Vale admitting fear? Only to you. Only ever to you." He kissed her then, properly, deeply, the way he should have months ago. The terrace was still visible from the ballroom, and Adrian knew they had an audience, knew this would be reported and discussed and analyzed. He didn't care. Let them see. Let them know. The Duke and Duchess Vale were no longer a political arrangement. They were real, and they were unbreakable. When they finally pulled apart, Alara was smiling through tears. "What happens now?" "Now we go home. Together. And we burn that contract the way we should have from the beginning." The Emperor might have other ideas about Lucien's fall. "Let him. I'm done playing political games. I serve the Empire because it's my duty, but you—" He touched her face gently. "You're my choice. And choices matter more than obligations." They walked back through the ballroom hand in hand, past whispers and stares and scandalized nobles. The Emperor watched them go with an expression that might have been approval or might have been calculation. Lucien was nowhere to be seen, already being questioned about his fabrications. Adrian didn't look back. For the first time in his life, he was walking towards something instead of away from fear. And the woman beside him, his wife, his partner, his equal, was the reason why. The carriage ride back to the Vale estate was quiet, but charged with emotion. They sat close together, Alara's head on Adrian's shoulder, his arm around her waist. No words were necessary. Everything had been said on that terrace in front of the entire imperial court. When they arrived home, Adrian led Alara directly to his study, the private sanctuary he'd kept locked from everyone, including her. He unlocked the door and guided her inside. "This is where I hide," he said quietly, "where I've been hiding for years. But I'm done with that too." He moved to the fireplace, pulled the original marriage contract from his desk drawer, and held it up. 12 rules, he said. 12 ways to keep each other at a distance. 12 reasons why we almost lost each other." He met Alara's eyes. "Say the word, and I'll burn it right now. No more rules, no more distance. Just us." Alara crossed the room slowly, took the contract from his hands, and read through it one final time. All the clauses that had governed their cold arrangement. All the careful language designed to prevent exactly what had happened. Two people falling in love despite every barrier. "Burn it," she said. Adrian threw the contract into the fire. They watched together as flames consumed the parchment, turning 12 months of cold distance into ash and smoke. When nothing remained but embers, Adrian pulled Alara close and kissed her properly, without fear or hesitation. This was what he'd been fighting all along, not just emotion, but the terrifying beauty of letting someone matter enough to break him. But standing here with Alara in his arms, his walls finally crumbled completely, Adrian realized something his mother had known all along. Some things were worth the risk of breaking. Love was one of them. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. A storm was coming. But inside the Vale Fortress, for the first time in years, warmth had returned to the cold stone halls. And in his study, Duke Adrian Vale held his wife and understood that the strongest fortress wasn't built from ice and control. It was built from trust, partnership, and the courage to be vulnerable with the right person. The storm that had threatened all evening finally broke just before dawn. Rain lashed against the windows of Adrian's study where neither of them had moved, content to sit together in the firelight and watch the ashes of their old contracts settle into nothing. Thunder rolled across the Vale Fortress like artillery fire, but inside, wrapped in each other's warmth, they felt untouchable. Until Garrett pounded on the study door with an urgency that shattered the peace. "Your Grace, emergency dispatch from the capital!" Adrian was on his feet instantly, military instincts overriding everything else. He opened the door to find Garrett soaking wet, rain dripping from his coat, his face grim. The Emperor collapsed 2 hours after the gala ended. His physicians don't expect him to survive the week. Garrett thrust a sealed document toward Adrian. He's calling an emergency succession council. Every duke, every prince, every major military commander. 3 days from now. Mandatory attendance. Adrian broke the seal and scanned the contents, his jaw tightening with each line. This wasn't just about succession anymore. The Emperor was forcing a complete restructuring of imperial power before he died. New military leadership, redistribution of territories, political alliances redrawn. Everything was in play. "Who else received this?" Adrian asked. "Everyone, including Prince Lucien, despite last night's disgrace." Garrett's expression darkened. Apparently the Emperor wants him present specifically. Said something about giving him a chance to prove his loyalty or hang himself publicly. That's political theater at its most vicious. Adrian moved to his map table, already calculating. Lucien will be desperate. A wounded predator is the most dangerous kind. "Then stay away from the capital," Alara said from behind them. She'd followed him to the door, still in her gala gown, hair coming loose from its elegant arrangement. "Send representatives. Don't walk into whatever trap he's setting." "I can't refuse an imperial summons." "You can if you're dead." Her voice was sharp with fear. "Lucian threatened to destroy you. He's been exposed and humiliated. Men like that don't accept defeat. They escalate." Adrian crossed back to her, taking her shoulders gently. "I know, which is why I'm not going alone." "What do you mean?" "The Emperor's decree says every duke must attend. It doesn't specify that duchesses can't accompany their husbands." He looked at Garrett. "How many troops can we move to the capital in 3 days without it appearing like an invasion?" Garrett's eyes widened with understanding. "Officially, your honor guard. 50 men, standard for a duke attending imperial functions. Unofficially, I could have 200 more positioned in the city under various pretenses. Merchant escorts, personal security for noble families visiting the capital, training exercises." "Do it. And send word to Duchess Alara's sisters. I want them moved to a secure location with guards. If Lucien tries to use them again, he won't get the chance," Garrett finished. He looked at Alara with something like respect. "Your Grace, if you're coming to the capital, you'll need appropriate security as well." "I can handle myself." "I know. I watched you eviscerate Lord Ashford last night. But humor us anyway." After Garrett left to begin preparations, Alara turned to Adrian with worry clear on her face. "You're bringing me into danger." "I'm bringing you into battle," he corrected. "There's a difference. Danger is random, uncontrolled. Battle is strategy, and you're brilliant at strategy. We proved that last night. Last night we had evidence and preparation. This succession council is chaos. Anything could happen." "Yes." Adrian pulled her close, his voice dropping to something fierce and protective. which is exactly why I want you beside me. Not locked away where I can't protect you, not separated where Lucian could target you. Together, where we're strongest." Alara was quiet for a moment, then, "You're asking me to walk into the center of imperial politics as a full partner. I'm asking you to do what you've been doing since the moment we married, survive with intelligence and courage, while everyone underestimates you." He tilted her chin up to meet his eyes. "The nobles think you're decorative, a purchased bride with no real power. Let them keep thinking that while you help me navigate the real game being played." A slow smile crossed her face. "You want me to be your secret weapon. I want you to be exactly what you are, the smartest person in any room we walk into. Let me be the visible military threat while you handle the subtle political maneuvering. Together, we'll be unstoppable." "That's quite a gamble on a woman you married as a contract 4 months ago." "No." Adrian kissed her forehead, her cheek, her lips. "It's quite a gamble on the woman I love. And I've never lost a battle I was willing to fight for." The next 3 days were organized chaos. Adrian's household transformed into a military operation. Troops moved out in careful intervals, disguised as routine movements to avoid alarming the capital. Documents were prepared, legal arguments rehearsed, contingency plans developed for every possible outcome of the succession council. The Vale Fortress became a war room, and Alara was at the center of it. She proved to have a natural talent for political strategy that rivaled Adrian's military genius. Where he saw force and direct confrontation, she saw leverage points and careful manipulation. Where he planned to dominate through strength, she planned to control through information and influence. "The Emperor's 3 sons are the obvious succession candidates," Alara said on the second day, spreading documents across the war table. "Prince Marcus holds the eastern provinces, but he's weak militarily. Prince Lucien has military backing, but he's just been exposed as corrupt. Prince Edmund controls the northern trade routes, but he's young and untested." "Which means none of them have clear superiority," Adrian observed. "The Emperor is forcing them to compete publicly. More than that, he's forcing them to reveal their true capabilities. This council isn't about choosing a successor, it's about watching them destroy each other so the Emperor can pick whoever survives the bloodbath." Alara tapped one of the documents. "But there's another factor, you." "I'm not in the succession." "No, but you control the largest military force in the Empire. Whoever wins your loyalty wins the throne, which means every prince will be trying to secure your allegiance." Adrian studied the map, seeing the power dynamics shift into focus. "And they'll try to use you to manipulate me." "They'll try. Let them." Alara's smile was sharp. "Every attempt they make will reveal their strategies. We'll know who to trust and who to eliminate as threats." "You sound like a general planning a campaign." "I learned from the best." She moved to stand beside him, their shoulders touching. "My father used to say that politics and warfare were just different expressions of the same game, understanding what your opponent wants and making sure they never get it." Your father was wiser than his debts suggested. He was brilliant and broken. The gambling wasn't about money. It was about trying to feel powerful when everything else was slipping away. Sadness flickered across her face. "I won't let that happen to us. We'll build power together, or not at all." Adrian turned to fully face her, struck once again by the strength she kept carefully hidden beneath courtly manners. "When we married, I thought I was saving you. I was wrong. We're saving each other." "Yes." She took his hands. "We are." They departed for the capital before dawn on the third day, their carriage flanked by Adrian's honor guard in full military dress, a show of strength that couldn't be ignored. Alara wore traveling clothes designed for practicality rather than decoration, her hair pulled back severely, her expression composed. She looked less like a decorative duchess and more like a warrior preparing for battle. The journey took 8 hours. They used the time to refine their strategies, drilling through possible scenarios and appropriate responses. By the time the imperial palace came into view, they'd prepared for 17 different political attacks and 12 potential assassination attempts. "You think Lucian will actually try to kill you?" Alara asked as their carriage rolled through the capital's gates. "I think Lucian is desperate enough to try anything, which makes him predictable. Desperate men make sloppy mistakes, unless they're smart enough to hide their desperation behind calculated moves."
Then we'll outthink him.
Adrian squeezed her hand. Remember, in public, we're the united front. In private, we dissect every conversation, every gesture, every implication. Nothing gets past us. The palace was chaos. Nobles crowded every corridor, their voices echoing off marble walls as political alliances formed and reformed in real time. Prince Marcus held court in the East Wing, surrounded by provincial lords who valued stability over strength. Prince Edmund occupied the South Wing with young, ambitious nobles eager for change. And Prince Lucian, "He's in the West Wing," Garrett reported quietly, meeting them in the entrance hall. Acting like last night's exposure never happened. He's been telling anyone who'll listen that Duke Adrian fabricated evidence to destroy a political rival. Of course he is. Adrian's voice was ice. Is the Emperor still alive? Barely. The physicians give him 3 days at most. The succession council convenes tomorrow at dawn. Garrett lowered his voice further. There's been talk of bypassing the princes entirely, naming you as regent until a proper successor is determined. Adrian felt Alara's hand tighten in his. Regent meant temporary absolute power and absolute danger. Every prince would see him as an obstacle to eliminate. Who's suggesting this? Alara asked before Adrian could respond. General Thorne and the military commanders. They don't trust any of the princes to lead the empire effectively. They want you because you win battles and maintain order. Garrett's expression was worried. But it would make you a target for everyone. I don't want to be regent, Adrian said flatly. I serve the empire. I don't rule it. Try telling that to the generals who've already started building support for the idea. They were escorted to quarters in the North Wing, neutral territory, away from the prince's power bases. As soon as the doors closed behind them, Alara started pacing. Regent, she said. They want to make you regent. I won't accept it. They might not give you a choice. If the military backs you and the emperor dies without naming a clear successor. She stopped pacing, her analytical mind already working through implications. This changes everything. Lucian won't just be trying to destroy your reputation anymore. He'll be trying to eliminate you as a political obstacle. Good. Adrian's voice was cold. Let him try. I'd rather have an open enemy than a hidden one. Adrian, I'm not afraid of Lucienne. He crossed to her, gripping her shoulders firmly. I'm afraid of failing you, of letting my focus waver when you're in danger. Promise me that if anything happens, you'll get out. Go back to the Vale estate. Take your sisters and disappear until the chaos settles. I'm not leaving you. Alara, no. Her voice was steel. You asked me to be your partner. That means I stay. In victory and in danger. Together or not at all. They stared at each other, both stubborn, both terrified, both refusing to show weakness. Finally, Adrian pulled her into his arms, holding her like she might disappear. I've spent my whole life avoiding exactly this. Caring about someone so much that losing them would destroy me. Then don't lose me. Alara's voice was muffled against his chest. Fight like you've never fought before. Be brilliant and ruthless and absolutely unbeatable. And trust me to do the same. A knock interrupted them. Adrian released Alara reluctantly and opened the door to find a young messenger, barely 16, looking terrified. Your Grace, Prince Marcus requests the honor of your presence for evening dinner. He wishes to discuss matters of mutual interest regarding imperial stability. Tell Prince Marcus I'll consider his invitation. And, the boy swallowed nervously, Prince Edmund requests a private audience at your earliest convenience to discuss military restructuring. Tell Prince Edmund the same. After the messenger left, another appeared within minutes. This one carried Prince Lucien's seal. Prince Lucien extends his apologies for recent misunderstandings and requests a chance to speak privately about clearing the air between you. Adrian took the message and closed the door in the messenger's face. All 3 princes, within an hour of our arrival, Alara observed. They're not even pretending to be subtle. They don't have time for subtlety. The Emperor is dying. Whoever secures my support wins the succession. Adrian opened Lucian's message, scanned it, and laughed without humor. He's claiming the evidence against him was misinterpreted, that he was actually investigating corruption, and Duke Adrian misunderstood his methods. Brazen. Desperate. Adrian crumpled the message. He knows he's lost the moral high ground. Now he's trying to rehabilitate his image before the council tomorrow.
So what do we do? Meet with them, refuse them all. We meet with all of them, but on our terms in public spaces, with witnesses. Adrian's mind was already calculating. And we listen very carefully to what they offer. Then we use that information to destroy whoever proves most dangerous. That evening, they attended Prince Marcus's dinner, a formal affair with 30 nobles present, everyone performing civility while assessing everyone else as potential allies or threats. Prince Marcus was smooth and diplomatic, speaking eloquently about stability and continuity, while carefully avoiding any direct criticism of his brothers. Duke Adrian, Marcus said over the main course, the Empire needs steady leadership in these uncertain times. Your military record speaks for itself. Your recent personal developments show admirable dedication to family values. His smile was practiced. I believe we could work together effectively to ensure a smooth transition of power. Translation: support me for Emperor and I'll overlook your emotional weaknesses. Your Highness honors me with his confidence, Adrian replied neutrally, though I wonder if stability is what the Empire truly needs, or if we require bold vision for expansion. A direct challenge. Marcus's smile tightened. Beside Adrian, Alara spoke for the first time that evening. Forgive my intrusion, Your Highness, but I'm curious, your proposal for maintaining current territorial boundaries. How would that address the northern tribes currently raiding our border settlements? Every eye turned to her. Women didn't typically interject in political discussions at formal dinners, but Alara met Marcus's gaze with calm confidence, and her question was precisely calculated to highlight his weakness, his defensive rather than offensive military philosophy. Marcus recovered smoothly. The northern tribes are a minor nuisance, Duchess Vale, hardly worth major military expenditure when diplomatic solutions have failed 3 times in the last 2 years, Alara interrupted gently. I've studied the border reports. The raids are increasing in frequency and boldness. At what point does a minor nuisance become a critical threat that requires decisive action? Silence around the table. Several military commanders were nodding almost imperceptibly. Alara had just echoed their private frustrations in a public forum, forcing Marcus to either acknowledge the problem or appear weak. The Duchess raises valid concerns, one of the commanders said carefully. Perhaps we should discuss military strategy in tomorrow's council. Marcus's expression had gone tight. Indeed, perhaps we should. The dinner concluded shortly after. As they walked back to their quarters, Adrian could barely contain his admiration. You just undermined Prince Marcus's entire political platform in front of his own supporters. He made it easy. His proposal was fundamentally flawed. You can't maintain an empire through pure defense. Eventually, you have to expand or you stagnate. Alara glanced at him. I assume that's what you would have said if you wanted to alienate him completely. I just said it with enough diplomatic coding that it sounded like a question instead of an accusation. Where did you learn to do that? Watching you, and reading every military treatise in your library while you thought I was just passing time. She smiled slightly. You're not the only one who can prepare for battle, Your Grace. They met with Prince Edmund the next morning, a younger, more energetic version of his older brothers, full of grand plans and ambitious schemes. His private audience took place in a garden courtyard where they could speak freely without obvious eavesdropping.
Duke Adrian, let's dispense with formalities, Edmund said, pacing with nervous energy. My brothers are dinosaurs. Marcus wants to maintain a dying system. Lucian is corrupt to his core. The Empire needs fresh vision, and you need an emperor who won't restrict your military genius. Support me, and I'll give you complete autonomy over Imperial forces. You'll answer to no one. Meaning I'd be your weapon to use as you see fit, Adrian replied. Meaning you'd have the freedom to do what you do best without political interference. Edmund leaned forward. I know about the regency proposal. The generals want you as a temporary solution because they don't trust any of us. But temporary solutions become permanent problems. You don't want to rule. You want to conquer and command. Let me handle the politics while you handle the wars. Perfect partnership. It was, Adrian had to admit, the most appealing offer so far. Edmund understood what motivated him and was offering exactly the right incentives, which made it even more dangerous. Your Highness, Alara interjected smoothly,
Your proposal assumes Duke Adrian's primary motivation is military freedom. But what if his priorities have evolved? What if he values other things now? Family, stability, the ability to be present for those he loves rather than constantly deployed to distant campaigns? Edmund looked between them, suddenly uncertain. I assumed you assumed wrong, Adrian said quietly. 6 months ago, your offer would have been irresistible. Now? Now I have reasons to stay home. Reasons that matter more than autonomy or freedom or military glory. Edmund's expression shifted to calculation. Then what do you want? To serve an emperor who understands that strength includes knowing when not to fight, who values strategy over ego, who won't send men to die for political vanity. Adrian's voice hardened. Can you be that emperor, Your Highness? Or are you just another ambitious prince who wants a crown without understanding its weight? The question hung in the air. Edmund opened his mouth, closed it, then finally said, I don't know, but I'm willing to learn. The honesty was surprising. Adrian reassessed the young prince with new eyes. That's the first intelligent thing any of the royal family has said to me in years, Adrian said. We'll consider your proposal. They left Edmund looking thoughtful rather than confident, which was exactly the goal. Keep all options open. Commit to nothing. Prince Lucien's audience came unsolicited that afternoon when he intercepted them in the palace corridors with 4 armed guards. Duke Adrian, Duchess. Lucien's smile was all venom. How convenient, running into you like this. We really must have that conversation about clearing up misunderstandings. There's nothing to clear up, Adrian said coldly. You fabricated evidence, got caught, and now you're scrambling to salvage your reputation before the succession council. We have nothing to discuss. On the contrary, Lucien moved closer, his guards flanking him aggressively. We have everything to discuss. See, I've been thinking about last night, about how convenient it was that you had investigators ready with evidence. Almost like you planned it, like you manufactured a crisis to make yourself look heroic. Careful, Your Highness. Accusations of fabrication work both ways. Do they? Lucien's eyes glittered with malice. Because I've started asking questions about the Montclair family, about their finances. And you know what I discovered? Your wife's father didn't just gamble away their fortune. He owed money to some very interesting people. People with connections to rebel groups. People who might have been funding treason. Adrian felt Alara go rigid beside him. This wasn't bluffing anymore. Lucien had found something real. My father owed money to loan sharks, Alara said, her voice steady despite the fear Adrian could feel radiating from her. Criminals, yes. Traitors, no. Are you certain? Because the loan sharks he borrowed from have been linked to 3 separate plots against the emperor, which means your father was either a traitor or catastrophically stupid. Either way, Lucien's smile widened. It makes your marriage to Duke Adrian a liability. How can the Empire trust him to be regent when his wife's family has documented ties to treason? Documented lies, Adrian growled. Are they? Because unlike last night, this evidence isn't fabricated. The financial records are real. The loan sharks are real and currently in imperial custody. And they're very willing to testify that Lord Montclair knew exactly who he was borrowing from and what they represented. Lucien leaned in close enough that his voice dropped to a whisper. Withdraw your name from regency consideration, Duke Adrian. Denounce your wife publicly and distance yourself from her treasonous family. Do that, and I'll make sure these inconvenient financial records disappear. Refuse, and by tomorrow's council, everyone will know you're married to a traitor's daughter. Adrian's hand went to his sword instinct, but Alara grabbed his wrist. Don't, she whispered. That's what he wants. Violence in a palace corridor with witnesses. She was right. Lucien's guards were positioned perfectly to make it look like Adrian attacked first. It was a trap within a trap. You have until tonight to decide, Lucien said, stepping back with theatrical casualness. Choose wisely, Duke Adrian. Your career or your wife. Can't have both. He walked away, his guards following, leaving Adrian and Alara standing in the corridor with the weight of an impossible choice crushing down on them. He found something real, Alara said quietly. My father's debts. I knew he borrowed from criminals, but I never investigated deep enough. It doesn't matter. It matters if it destroys you. She turned to face him, tears threatening. Adrian, if my family's connection to traitors is real, you have to distance yourself. The Regency, your reputation, everything you've built, I won't let my father's stupidity ruin you. I'm not choosing between you and my career. You have to. No. Adrian pulled her close despite being in a public corridor, despite propriety, despite everything. I don't. Because Lucien made a critical mistake. What mistake? He thinks I care more about being regent than about you. He's wrong. Adrian's voice was absolutely certain. I'll find another way. We'll find another way. But I am not giving you up. Not for a throne, not for power, not for anything. Alara buried her face in his chest. You're going to lose everything because of me. No. He tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his eyes. I'm going to win everything that matters. With you. For a moment, they stood there, holding each other in the middle of imperial chaos. Two people who'd started as a contract and become something unbreakable. Then Adrian's mind shifted into the cold, strategic calculation that had won him 100 battles. Garrett, he called out, knowing his secretary was nearby as always. I need you to do something that's probably going to start a war. Garrett appeared from a side corridor, his expression grim. What do you need? Find those loan sharks in imperial custody, the ones Lucien claims have evidence against the Montclair family. I want to speak with them, tonight, privately. That's highly irregular, Your Grace. They're under imperial guard. Then irregularly arrange it. Bribe whoever you need to bribe. Threaten whoever you need to threaten. But get me access to those prisoners before Lucien uses them to destroy us tomorrow. Garrett hesitated, then nodded. It'll be done. After he left, Alara looked at Adrian with worry and hope warring on her face. What are you planning? Something incredibly stupid or incredibly brilliant. I won't know which until it's over. Adrian took her hands. But I learned something from you these past months. Sometimes the bold move is the only move. Lucien expects me to either submit or attack him directly. So I'm going to do neither. I'm going to go after the truth, and I'm going to use it to bury him completely. And if the truth is worse than he claims, then we'll deal with that together. But I refuse to make decisions based on fear of what might be true. We find out what's real, and then we fight. He squeezed her hands. Trust me? Alara's smile was shaky but genuine. With my life. Good. Because I'm about to gamble both our lives on the assumption that your father was stupid, but not treasonous. That night, Garrett led them through service corridors to the palace dungeons where the loan sharks were being held. 2 guards stood watch, and Garrett had clearly paid them well because they conveniently developed temporary blindness as Adrian and Alara slipped past. The loan shark who'd lent money to Lord Montclair was a wiry man with calculating eyes, and the look of someone who'd survived by always knowing which way to jump. When Adrian entered his cell, the man's expression shifted from wariness to recognition. Duke Vale. Heard about you. The frozen one, they call you. Though rumor is you've warmed up lately. His eyes slid to Alara. The daughter. You look like your father. Same stubborn jaw. You knew my father, Alara said. Knew him? Funded his spectacular self-destruction for 2 years. Man couldn't stop gambling even when he was borrowing from people who'd cut his throat for being late on payments. The loan shark shrugged. But he paid. Always paid. Eventually. That's why we kept lending. Prince Lucien claims you have evidence my father was funding rebel groups, Adrian said bluntly. Is that true? The loan shark laughed, a harsh sound. Funding rebels? Your father-in-law couldn't fund his own dinner, Duke. He was desperate, stupid, and self-destructive. But a traitor? No, he just borrowed money. What we did with that money afterward isn't his concern. Explain. Simple economics. We lend to desperate nobles at ruinous interest rates. They pay us back by selling family treasures, lands, whatever they can liquidate. We take that money and invest it, sometimes in legitimate business, sometimes in less legitimate operations. Some of our investments ended up funding groups that opposed the emperor. But Lord Montclair didn't know that. Didn't care. He just needed money to feed his addiction.
Adrian felt something shift in his chest. Not quite relief, but the beginning of it. You're saying he was an ignorant debtor, not a conspirator. Exactly. Though try telling that to Prince Lucian. He's been very interested in making connections that don't exist, offering me a pardon if I testify that Lord Montclair was actively funding rebels. The loan shark smiled without warmth. I haven't decided yet whether to take the deal. Depends on who offers me a better one. This was it, the leverage point. What do you want? Adrian asked. Same thing everyone wants, to survive with my profits intact. I've got accounts all over the empire, money hidden in places the imperial treasury will never find. But if I'm executed for treason, all that disappears. My family gets nothing. And if you testify against Prince Lucien, tell the succession council that he tried to bribe you into fabricating evidence? Then I'm a dead man. Lucien's got friends. I'd be murdered in my cell within a week. Not if you're under my protection. Adrian's voice was steel. Testify truthfully tomorrow. Confirm that Lord Montclair was an ignorant debtor, not a conspirator. Expose Lucien's attempt to manipulate your testimony. In exchange, I'll guarantee your safety, a pardon for non-treason crimes, and you keep your hidden accounts. Your family survives wealthy and protected. The loan shark studied Adrian for a long moment, weighing options. The frozen duke, making deals in dungeons. Never thought I'd see the day. He glanced at Alara. You really love her that much? More than anything. Damn. The loan shark actually looked impressed. All right, deal. I testify truthfully, you keep me breathing, but if Lucien's assassins get to me before tomorrow's council, they won't. Adrian turned to Garrett. Get him moved to secure quarters under armed guard. My personal troops, no imperial soldiers. No one gets access without my explicit permission. As they left the dungeons, Alara was shaking with relief and residual terror. You just promised to protect a criminal. I promised to protect the truth. The criminal is just a means to an end. Adrian pulled her into a shadowed alcove, needing to hold her, needing to feel her solid and real. Tomorrow, in front of the entire succession council, we're going to destroy Lucien completely. Not with fabricated evidence or political maneuvering, with the simple, devastating truth. And then what? Even if we win this battle, you're still being pushed toward regency you don't want. Then we'll handle that too. One crisis at a time. He kissed her forehead. But tonight, right now, I need you to know something. Whatever happens tomorrow, whether we win or lose, whether I become regent or remain a duke, you are the best decision I've ever made. The contract was politics. This, us, is real. And I would burn the empire to ash before I'd give you up. Alara's laugh was half sob. That's either the most romantic or most terrifying thing anyone's ever said to me. Can it be both? They stood together in the darkness, preparing for the battle that would determine everything. The succession council convened at dawn. Either they'd emerge victorious and transform the empire's power structure, or they'd be destroyed by forces they couldn't control. But for this moment, they were together. United, unbreakable. And that, Adrian realized, was the real victory. Not defeating Lucien or avoiding regency or protecting reputations. The real victory was learning that love wasn't weakness. It was the strongest weapon of all. Dawn came too quickly and not quickly enough. Adrian stood at the window of their quarters, watching the capital wake to what might be the most consequential day in imperial history. Beside him, Alara was already dressed in a gown of deep crimson, a deliberate choice, the color of blood and war, and refusing to hide. Her hair was arranged in a crown braid that made her look regal and formidable. You look like a warrior queen, Adrian said quietly. Good. That's what I was aiming for. She adjusted the silver pins holding her hair in place. If we're walking into the succession council to expose a prince and refuse a regency, I might as well look the part. You're not afraid? I'm terrified. But fear's just another weapon if you know how to use it. She turned to face him fully. My father taught me that the night before we lost everything. He said that when you're drowning, you have two choices: panic and die faster, or get angry and fight. I chose anger, and I'm still choosing it. Adrian crossed to her, taking her face in his hands. Whatever happens in that council chamber, we face it together, I know. She covered his hands with hers. No more separate wings, no more distance, just us. A knock interrupted them. Garrett entered, looking grim and determined. The council convenes in 30 minutes. The loan shark is secured in a private antechamber with guards. The emperor is being carried in on a litter. Apparently, he insisted on attending despite his physician's protests. Garrett paused. And Prince Lucien just arrived with 50 armed men. He's claiming it's ceremonial honor guard, but everyone knows it's intimidation. Of course it is. Adrian's voice was ice. He's gambling that a show of force will make people too afraid to challenge him. Let him play his hand. We'll destroy him with truth instead of swords. They walked through palace corridors that were thick with tension, nobles clustering in nervous groups, whispering behind hands, watching Adrian and Alara pass with expressions ranging from respect to fear to calculation. Everyone knew something momentous was about to happen. The question was whether they'd witness the birth of a new power structure or a political massacre. The succession council was held in the empire's grand throne room, a cavernous space designed to dwarf everyone except the emperor himself. 300 nobles filled the chamber, representing every major family and territory. At the front, on a raised platform, sat Emperor Hadrian IV on a makeshift throne, his body so frail it seemed like a strong wind might shatter him. His eyes, however, burned with fierce intelligence despite his failing body. The three princes stood to his right, Marcus composed and diplomatic, Edmund nervous but determined, Lucien confident and surrounded by his armed guards in a barely subtle threat. Adrian and Alara took their position among the high-ranking dukes, and every eye in the room tracked them. The duke who'd exposed a prince's corruption, the duchess who'd publicly challenged nobility. Together they represented something dangerous to the established order: competence married to courage, strength without cruelty, power wielded with precision. The emperor raised one trembling hand, and silence fell like a blade. "We are here," Hadrian's voice was thin but carried absolute authority, "to determine the future of this empire. I am dying. This is not speculation, it is fact. Before I die, I will name my successor or establish a regency. But first," his eyes swept the room, lingering on Lucien, "we will address certain accusations that have emerged." Lucien's confident expression flickered. "Prince Lucien," the emperor continued, "you stand accused of fabricating evidence against Duke Adrian Vale's marriage. You claim Duke Adrian manufactured this accusation to discredit you. Before we discuss succession, we will settle this matter definitively." He gestured weakly. "Duke Adrian, present your case." Adrian stepped forward, his military bearing commanding attention even without weapons. "Your Imperial Majesty, Prince Lucien attempted to destroy my marriage by fabricating documents that claim my wife's family funded treason. When that failed, he pivoted to claiming real financial records proved the same accusation. Neither claim is true, and I can prove it." "With what evidence?" Lucien interjected smoothly. "You've already demonstrated your willingness to manipulate investigations to serve your personal interests." "With testimony from the loan shark you tried to bribe." Adrian's voice cut through the room like a sword. "The criminal you attempted to coerce into fabricating evidence against an innocent family. He's here, under my protection, ready to testify truthfully about your manipulation." The throne room erupted in whispers. Lucien's face went white, then red with rage. "This is absurd! You're claiming I'm not claiming. I'm stating fact." Adrian gestured to Garrett, who brought the loan shark forward from the antechamber. The man looked terrified but determined, flanked by Adrian's personal guards. The emperor leaned forward with visible interest. "Speak." The loan shark swallowed hard, then began. "Your Majesty, I lent money to Lord Montclair for 2 years. He was a gambler, an addict, a fool with finances. But he wasn't a traitor. He borrowed money to feed his addiction and paid it back by selling family assets. What I did with that money afterward, investing it, moving it through various operations, that wasn't his concern or knowledge." "And Prince Lucien," the emperor prompted, "came to me 3 days ago, offered me a full pardon and 10,000 in gold if I'd testify that Lord Montclair actively funded rebel groups. He wanted me to say the old man knew where the money was going and supported it. All lies. I was supposed to say it anyway in exchange for my freedom." The loan shark looked directly at Lucien. "But Duke Adrian offered me something better: the truth, protection, and a chance to keep my actual assets. So here's the truth, Your Majesty. Prince Lucien tried to bribe me into fabricating evidence. Lord Montclair was guilty of stupidity and addiction, nothing more. The Duchess is innocent of any connection to treason. The silence that followed was absolute. Lucien's face twisted with fury. This is a setup. Adrian Vale orchestrated this entire— Enough! The Emperor's voice, though weak, carried devastating finality. I have heard enough lies from you, Lucien. First the fabricated documents at the gala. Now this attempted manipulation of criminal testimony. You have proven yourself unfit for succession through corruption and dishonesty. His hand trembled as he pointed. You are hereby removed from consideration for the throne. Guards, escort Prince Lucien to confinement pending further investigation into his criminal activities. Father, you can't— Lucien's voice rose to something desperate. I am your son. I have military support. The generals follow Duke Adrian, not you. They always have. The Emperor's eyes were cold. You mistook their politeness for loyalty. You are nothing without the power you tried to steal through manipulation and lies. Now you have nothing. Imperial guards moved forward. Lucien's personal guards hesitated, clearly calculating whether to fight and realizing they were outnumbered 3-1 by loyalist forces. Lucien saw his power evaporate in real time, his face contorting through rage and disbelief and finally, terrifyingly, acceptance. You're making a mistake, he said quietly as guards took his arms. The Empire needs strength, and Adrian Vale is compromised by attachment. He'll destroy everything you built. No! Alar's voice rang out, clear and strong. She stepped forward before Adrian could stop her, moving to stand beside him in front of the entire assembly. He'll build something better, because strength isn't measured by cruelty or isolation. It's measured by knowing what's worth protecting and having the courage to do it. 300 nobles stared at her, a duchess who'd been purchased as property, now speaking with authority in front of the Emperor himself. Duchess Vale makes an excellent point, the Emperor said, and something that might have been amusement flickered across his dying face. Which brings us to the succession question. Prince Marcus, step forward. Marcus moved forward with practiced grace, clearly expecting to be named heir now that Lucien was eliminated. You represent stability and tradition, the Emperor said, but you lack vision. The Empire cannot afford to stagnate while border threats grow. Prince Edmund. Edmund stepped forward nervously. You have vision and energy, but lack experience and wisdom. You would make bold moves without understanding their consequences. The Emperor's gaze swept both remaining princes. Neither of you is ready to rule alone. Therefore— Here it comes, Adrian thought. The regency appointment. The trap he couldn't escape. I am establishing a council regency. Both princes will share power under the guidance of a regent who will serve for 3 years, training you both, ensuring stability while preparing you for joint rule. The Emperor's eyes fixed on Adrian. Duke Adrian Vale, you are hereby appointed regent of the Empire, effective upon my death. The throne room exploded in reaction, some cheering, some protesting, most simply shocked. Adrian felt the weight of an empire settle onto his shoulders like chains. Your Majesty, Adrian said carefully, I am honored, but I must respectfully— Decline. The Emperor's voice strengthened slightly. You think you have that luxury? The Empire needs you, Duke Adrian. The military trusts you. The nobility respects you, or fears you, which amounts to the same thing. You are the only person capable of holding this realm together while my sons learn to rule properly. I didn't seek this power. No, which is precisely why you must accept it. Those who want power are usually unfit for it. Those who fear its weight are the only ones who should carry it. The Emperor coughed, blood speckling his lips. But I am not cruel. I know what I'm asking. 3 years of your life, 3 years of service, and then you may return to your estate, your wife, your private life. Can you give the Empire 3 years, Duke Adrian? Adrian felt Ilara's hand slip into his, steadying him. He looked at her, seeing support and love and determination. Not alone, Adrian said finally. If I accept this regency, my wife serves as co-regent. Full authority, equal voice. The Empire doesn't get just me, it gets both of us. Gasps rippled through the chamber. A woman as regent was unprecedented. Revolutionary. Impossible. Done, the Emperor said immediately, stunning everyone, including Adrian. Duchess Alara Vale will serve as co-regent with full authority. The Empire will be ruled by partnership, not isolation. Perhaps that's the true lesson here, that strength comes from trust, not dominance. He slumped back, exhausted. His physicians rushed forward, but the Emperor waved them away with his last strength. 3 years, he repeated. Then freedom. Do you accept? Adrian looked at Alara, saw his own conflicted emotions reflected back, fear and duty, and love and determination, all mixed together. Together? He asked her quietly. Always together, she confirmed. Adrian turned back to the Emperor and the assembled nobles and the weight of an empire watching his decision. We accept. The Emperor smiled, and it transformed his dying face into something peaceful. Good. Finally, something done right. His eyes closed. Now someone get me out of this damn throne room before I die in front of everyone. Undignified. Physicians and attendants rushed forward, carrying the Emperor away. The throne room erupted in noise. Nobles arguing, alliances reforming, the entire political landscape shifting in real time as people recalculated power dynamics around the new co-regency. Prince Marcus approached first, his expression carefully neutral. Duke Adrian, Duchess Alara. I suppose congratulations are in order, or perhaps condolences. Regency is not an enviable position. No, Adrian agreed, but necessary. 3 years. Then my brother and I assume joint rule, correct? If you prove yourselves capable, that's the arrangement. Marcus studied them both. You could keep power after 3 years, refuse to step down. Who would stop you? We would stop ourselves, Alara said firmly. We didn't want this. We're serving because it's needed, not because we're hungry for thrones. Something like respect flickered across Marcus's face. Then perhaps the Empire chose well after all. We'll work together, Duke Adrian, for stability. Prince Edmund was next, practically vibrating with barely contained energy. Co-regents, both of you. That's brilliant. Completely unprecedented, but brilliant. Can we discuss military reforms? I have 17 proposals. Later, Adrian interrupted. Right now, we need to ensure the transition happens smoothly and that your brother Lucian doesn't attempt something desperate from confinement. Right, yes, of course, Edmund bounced on his heels. But soon, the reforms are really important. Soon, Alara promised, and Edmund beamed at her like she'd offered him the keys to the treasury. Over the next hour, they received a parade of nobles, some offering genuine support, most positioning themselves for advantage, a few making barely veiled threats about what would happen if the regency didn't serve their interests. Adrian fielded them all with cold efficiency while Alara charmed and calculated and quietly assessed every person who approached. They were a perfect team, his strength and her strategy, his military authority and her political acumen. Together, they were formidable in ways neither could achieve alone. Finally, the throne room began to empty. The succession council was over. The emperor had made his choice. The empire had new rulers, at least temporarily. Adrian and Alara stood alone in the massive chamber, surrounded by empty space and the weight of what they'd just accepted. 3 years, Alara said quietly. 3 years of our lives given to an empire that will probably hate us for half our decisions and worship us for the other half. 3 years of never being alone, never being private, every choice scrutinized and criticized. Adrian pulled her close. I'm sorry. I should have found a way to refuse. No. She looked up at him. You did exactly right, because if we'd refused, someone else would have taken power, someone less capable, less honest, probably less kind, and the empire would have suffered. This way we suffer instead, but we do it together. She smiled slightly. Though I have to say, co-regent is a significant promotion from purchased Duchess. You were never just a purchased Duchess. I know, but it took you a while to figure that out. I'm a slow learner when it comes to matters of the heart. Yes? She kissed him softly. But you got there eventually. That's what matters. They stayed like that for a moment, holding each other in the empty throne room, drawing strength from the connection they'd built through months of struggle and transformation.
Then Garrett cleared his throat from the doorway. Your Graces, and I suppose I should get used to calling you that now, the Emperor's physicians report that he passed away peacefully in his chambers 10 minutes ago. The Regency is now officially active. You have approximately 6 hours before the formal coronation ceremony where you'll take your oaths. The weight of it hit like a physical blow. They were regents now, rulers of an empire, responsible for millions of lives, countless decisions, the fate of an entire civilization. 6 hours, Adrian repeated. Time enough to return to our quarters, change into ceremonial robes, and prepare to swear our lives away. Or, Alar suggested, time enough to return to our quarters, burn that ceremonial nonsense, and show up to the coronation as ourselves, military commander and political strategist, husband and wife, partners in this madness. Adrian almost smiled. The nobles will be scandalized. Good. Let them be scandalized from the start. Set the tone immediately. We're not traditional rulers. We're practical ones. I love you, Adrian said suddenly, fiercely. In case I haven't said it enough. In case the next 3 years make me forget to say it. I love you more than power or duty or anything else this empire can offer. I know. Alara's eyes were bright. That's why we'll survive this. Because we have something worth surviving for. The coronation ceremony was held at sunset in the great cathedral, an ancient stone structure that had witnessed the crowning of 15 emperors over 4 centuries. Normally, such ceremonies took weeks to plan and involved elaborate pageantry designed to emphasize the divine right of rulers. Adrian and Alara gave them 6 hours and walked in wearing their normal formal attire rather than ceremonial robes. The assembled nobility looked scandalized. Perfect. The High Chancellor, a wizened man who'd served 3 emperors, raised his eyebrows but proceeded with the ceremony. Adrian and Alara stood before the altar, not kneeling, but standing tall and together, as the Chancellor recited the ancient oaths of regency. Do you swear to serve the empire above all personal interests? We swear, they said in unison. Do you swear to uphold justice without favoritism or corruption? We swear. Do you swear to protect the realm from enemies foreign and domestic? We swear. The Chancellor placed a thin silver circlet on Adrian's head, not a crown, but the regent's marker of temporary authority. Then, in a move that made half the assembled nobles gasp, he placed an identical circlet on Alara's head. Rise, regents of the empire! May your rule be just, your decisions wise, and your service honorable. They rose, turned to face the assembled crowd. 300 nobles stared back, their expressions ranging from support to skepticism to barely concealed hostility. Adrian spoke first, his voice carrying through the cathedral. We did not seek this power. We do not want this throne. But we accept this duty because the empire needs stability and the princes need time to learn proper leadership. For 3 years we will serve. We will make difficult decisions. We will anger some of you. We will disappoint others. But everything we do will be in service of this realm's survival and prosperity. Alara continued seamlessly. We rule as partners, not as master and subject. We will seek counsel from those wiser than us. But we will not be paralyzed by tradition when innovation is required. The empire is changing. The world is changing. We will change with it, or we will die clinging to the past. That choice is ours to make, and we choose evolution. Silence. Then slowly, starting from the military commanders in the front rows, applause began. Not universal. Many nobles remained stone-faced, but enough to signal that the regency had at least partial support. It would have to be enough. The ceremony concluded. Adrian and Alara walked out of the cathedral together, the thin silver circlets on their heads catching the last light of sunset. Tomorrow, the real work would begin, governing an empire, training princes, navigating political minefields while maintaining the military superiority that kept enemies at bay. But tonight, they had a few hours of freedom before the weight of duty crushed down permanently. They returned to the palace, their palace now, technically, and went directly to the private imperial quarters. Garrett had already had their belongings moved from the guest wing. The rooms were massive, ornate, designed to overwhelm with displays of wealth and power. Adrian hated them immediately. We're redecorating, he announced. Agreed. Alara looked around at the gold-encrusted furniture and oppressive tapestries. This looks like a treasury exploded. I can't think in here. Then we make it functional. A real war room, a proper study, space to work and plan and actually accomplish something instead of just looking impressive. The nobles will be scandalized. Again. Good. I'm starting to enjoy scandalizing them. Alara laughed, and the sound was so genuine and warm that Adrian felt something in his chest unclench. They were in impossible circumstances, carrying impossible weight, facing 3 years of impossible challenges. But they were together, and that made everything possible. He crossed to her, removing the silver circlet from her head and setting it aside, then removing his own. Just Adrian and Alara again, not regents, not rulers, just two people who'd started as a contract and become something extraordinary. Dance with me, he said. There's no music. I don't care. He pulled her close and they moved together in the silent room, swaying to a rhythm only they could hear. Outside, the Empire waited for leadership. Inside, two people held each other and remembered why they were fighting. 3 years, Alara whispered against his chest. Then we go home. 3 years, Adrian confirmed. Then freedom. The Vale estate. Your sisters visiting whenever they want. Quiet dinners without political maneuvering. Gardens without assassination plots. Just us. Sounds like paradise. It will be. He kissed the top of her head. Because you'll be there. They stayed like that until full darkness fell, holding each other in the empty palace, drawing strength from their connection. Then they separated, moved to the desk, and began the work of ruling an empire. The first few months of regency were chaos barely contained by discipline and determination. Adrian restructured the military, eliminating corruption and promoting based on competence rather than nobility. Alara overhauled the imperial treasury, discovering 3 more embezzlement schemes and recovering funds that went directly to border defense and infrastructure improvements. Together they met with every major noble family, every military commander, every provincial governor. They listened to grievances, made difficult decisions, and slowly built a reputation not for being beloved, but for being effective. Prince Lucien was tried for corruption and treason. The evidence was overwhelming. He was stripped of his title and exiled to a remote monastery where he could spend the rest of his life contemplating his failures. His supporters scattered like smoke. Prince Marcus proved to be a capable administrator when actually given responsibility and guidance. Prince Edmund's military reforms, once Adrian and Alara had edited out the most reckless proposals, significantly improved border security. The empire stabilized, trade increased, border raids decreased. Slowly, grudgingly, even the most hostile nobles began to admit that the co-regency was working, but it cost them. Every day was 18 hours of meetings, decisions, crises managed, and disasters averted. They fell into bed exhausted every night, barely having time for each other, the weight of duty crushing down relentlessly. 6 months into the regency, Alara collapsed from exhaustion during a diplomatic meeting. Adrian carried her out personally, ignoring protocol and propriety, and spent the next 3 days refusing to leave her side while physicians ensured she recovered. I'm fine, she insisted weakly. Just tired. You're working yourself to death. Adrian's voice was rough with fear. We're both working ourselves to death. This isn't sustainable. We don't have a choice. Yes, we do. He took her hand, gripping it like a lifeline. We delegate more. We trust our advisors to handle smaller decisions. We protect ourselves, or we'll burn out before the 3 years are finished. The Empire needs us alive and functional, not martyred to duty. Adrian's voice softened. Remember what we promised each other? Together. That means both of us surviving this, not sacrificing ourselves for an empire that will forget us the moment we step down. Alara was quiet for a long moment. Then, you're right. We need balance. Need to remember who we are outside of these circlets. Then let's find it. 1 evening a week. No politics, no duty, no regency. Just us. A few hours to remember why we're doing this. She smiled weakly. Scandalizing the nobles again? Always. They implemented the change immediately. Every week, 1 evening was declared off limits for official business. They walked the palace gardens, played chess, read books that had nothing to do with governance, made love without the weight of an empire pressing down on them. And slowly, they found their balance. 3 years passed faster and slower than seemed possible. They aged in that time, not just physically, though Adrian's hair gained gray at the temples and lines appeared around Alara's eyes, but in wisdom and understanding. They learned how to rule without losing themselves, how to make impossible choices and live with the consequences, how to balance duty and love, service and survival.
When the 3-year mark finally arrived, the empire had been transformed. The economy was stronger, the military more efficient, the political structure more stable. Prince Marcus and Prince Edmund were ready, not perfect but capable, to assume joint rule as their father had intended. The abdication ceremony was far simpler than the coronation. Adrian and Alara stood before the same cathedral, removed their silver circlets, and placed them on a velvet cushion held by the High Chancellor. "We return this authority to its rightful holders," Adrian said. "The empire is stronger than we found it. May you preserve and improve what we've built." Prince Marcus accepted his circlet with dignity. "We are grateful for your service, Duke Adrian, Duchess Alara. The empire will remember your sacrifice." Prince Edmund grinned as he took his. "We definitely won't ruin everything you fixed. Probably. Mostly. We'll try really hard not to." Alara almost laughed. "Almost. The empire is yours now, your majesties. Rule it well." They walked out of the cathedral to scattered applause. Less enthusiastic than the coronation, but genuine. They'd proven themselves, done their duty, and now they were free. The journey back to the Vale estate took 2 days. With every mile they traveled from the capital, Adrian felt the weight lifting from his shoulders. No more imperial politics, no more succession crises, no more choosing between the needs of millions and the needs of his own soul. Just freedom. And Alara. When the Vale fortress finally came into view, gray stone walls against green hills, solid and permanent and home, Adrian felt something in his chest finally unclench completely. They arrived to find Alara's sisters waiting in the courtyard, both grown into young women now, accompanied by household staff who'd maintained the estate during their absence. "You're back," Lily said, tears streaming down her face. "You're actually back. We promised we would be," Alara said, embracing both her sisters. 3 years of service, then home. And here we are. Rose looked between Adrian and Alara. "Are you really done with politics? Really, truly?" "Really, truly," Adrian confirmed. "We've served our time. Now we just want to live quietly." "Quietly?" Garrett appeared from the entrance hall, looking skeptical. "You two? Impossible." "Watch us," Alara challenged. They settled back into the Vale estate like putting on comfortable clothes after years in formal armor. Adrian returned to managing his duchy, far simpler than managing an empire. Alara worked with local administrators to improve her family's old estate, which Adrian had purchased and restored during their regency. They had dinners with Alara's sisters every week, walked the grounds holding hands, read books by the fire, made love without political weight crushing down on them. They lived. 6 months after their return, Adrian found Alara in the library where they'd first begun to connect all those months ago. She was reading military history, her favorite subject, in the chair where he'd once covered her with his coat while she slept. "I've been thinking," he said, sitting beside her. "Dangerous activity." "About the contract." He pulled it out. Not the original that they'd burned, but a copy he'd kept for records. 12 rules, 12 ways to keep distance. We burned the original, but I never actually wrote a replacement. We don't need a replacement. We're married. We love each other. What else matters? Agreed, but I want something in writing anyway. New rules. Better ones. He pulled out a fresh piece of parchment and a pen. "Help me write it?" Alara smiled, intrigued. "All right, what's the first rule?" Adrian thought for a moment, then wrote, "Rule 1. Always choose each other, even when it's difficult." "Rule 2. Alara continued, watching him write. "Be honest, even when the truth is uncomfortable." They continued, trading suggestions, arguing playfully over wording, building a new contract that wasn't about distance, but about connection. Rule 3. Protect each other's vulnerabilities instead of exploiting them. Rule 4. Celebrate victories together, large and small. Rule 5. In conflicts, remember your partners, not opponents. Rule 6. Make time for joy, not just duty. Rule 7. Trust each other's judgment, especially when it differs from your own. Rule 8. Never go to sleep angry without at least trying to resolve it. Rule 9. Support each other's individual growth, not just shared goals. Rule 10. Remember that strength includes asking for help. Rule 11. Laugh together as often as possible. Rule 12. When everything else fails, hold each other and remember why you fought so hard to stay together. When they finished, Adrian read through the list and felt something settle in his soul. Rightness, contentment, the peace that comes from finally arriving where you were always meant to be. This is a good contract, he said. Much better than the first one, Ilara agreed, though I notice it's missing consequences for rule violations. That's because the only consequence that matters is disappointing each other. And neither of us wants to do that. No, we don't. She took his hand. So this is our marriage now? Really married, not just on paper? This is our marriage. Really, truly, completely married. Adrian pulled her close. No more separate wings, no more emotional distance, no more pretending we don't need each other. Just us? Just us, for the rest of our lives. They signed the new contract together, unnecessary but symbolic, and placed it in the library where anyone could read it if they wanted. Let it stand as proof that the frozen Duke Adrian Vale and his purchased Duchess had become something neither could have imagined when they first met. They'd become partners, equals, a team stronger together than either could be alone. They'd become love wrapped in strategy, strength softened by vulnerability, power wielded with compassion. They'd become exactly what they needed to be. Years later, people would tell stories about the Duke and Duchess Vale, how they'd exposed a corrupt prince, ruled an empire for 3 years, then walked away from power to live quietly, how they'd transformed each other from cold strangers into devoted partners, how they proved that the strongest bonds weren't built on passion alone, but on choice, commitment, and the daily decision to keep choosing each other. But in the library of the Vale estate, where it all began, Adrian and Ilara didn't care about stories or legends or how history would remember them. They cared about the life they were building, the love they'd fought for, the partnership that had saved them both. Outside, spring was arriving, flowers blooming in gardens they'd walk together, warm evenings ahead where they'd sit and talk about everything and nothing, a future stretching forward full of possibility and peace. Inside, Adrian pulled Ilara into his arms and kissed her with all the love he'd spent years learning how to express. "I love you," he said, the words coming easily now after so much practice. "I love you too," Ilara replied, smiling against his lips. "Always have, always will." And in that moment, in that library where their transformation began, surrounded by books and memories, and the ashes of an old contract that no longer mattered, they were simply two people who'd found each other in the darkness and chosen to build something bright. The contract had burned, the rules had changed, the distance had collapsed, and in its place stood love, real, earned, unbreakable. The end of their story was just the beginning of their life together, and it was glorious.